Chapter 1170. Who? Lin Sun's breathing became rapid and heavy. Every time he breathed, his internal injuries were affected, causing spasmodic pain, and his face became paler and paler. Fortunately, the wounds on his chest had been completely healed. Puff! Under the eaves in the distance, a practitioner fell to the ground and died silently. Before long, several figures rushed out from one side of the street, but before they could do anything, they fell to the ground one by one and died violently. From beginning to end, Lin Sun didn't stop or even look at them. He knew that as long as Silver was here, even ordinary peerless figures couldn't hurt him. Before long, a courtyard appeared in a remote corner of the street in the distance. It was the residence Lin Sun had bought before. "Master, something is wrong." In the distance, Silver warned Lin Sun with a solemn voice. Lin Sun also keenly noticed that at this moment, there were brilliant escape lights rushing from all directions like a tide. Obviously, they came in groups and were aggressive, obviously from different forces. As far as the eye could see, there were figures of practitioners everywhere, dense like locusts, which was frightening. All the ears were filled with the sound of escape lights breaking through the air, which was breathtaking. Obviously, the descendants of the ancient orthodoxies in the city had heard the news and rushed here as soon as possible. They wanted to take this opportunity to kill Lin Sun. "Silver, come back. You don't have to do anything next." Lin Sun's black eyes were cold with extreme indifference. "Master," Silver was stunned. "Why, don't you trust me?" As Lin Sun spoke, he didn't stop moving at all. He flashed to his courtyard. But at this moment, Silver was very stubborn and resolute and said, "Master, even if I die in battle, I won't retreat. Please let me fight side by side with you." Lin Sun was stunned, and then he suddenly smiled and said no more. Boom! The void was incinerated, and the golden flames raged. A group of golden crow powerhouses came and landed on the ground. They fixed their eyes on Lin Sun as if they were staring at a dead man. "Fellow practitioners of Golden Crow Tribe, can you hand over this guy to our Bee Spirit Mountain?" At the same time, Lu Chuan of the Myriad Bee Spirit Mountain also arrived with a group of cultivators. They were overbearing as they sealed off another region. "No, this demon god Lin must be handed over to our Xuandu orthodoxy. Everyone, Fiend Celestial Lin has a deep feud with my race. If you can hand him over, my Sea Soul race will be eternally grateful." This kid killed our moon-worshipping cult successor in Burning Sky Valley. I advise everyone not to get involved. We will definitely kill this demon god Lin. Loud shouts rose and fell as they resounded in the heavens and the earth. Along with the voice, strong practitioners from different orthodoxies appeared in the field one after another and blocked the area where Lin Sun was. They approached menacingly and didn't conceal their killing intent in the slightest, causing the air to be filled with an oppressive, murderous aura. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. He looked at them quietly and memorized the names of the orthodoxies that appeared in the field. There were numerous other cultivators watching from even further away. When they saw that, they could not help but feel a chill run down their spines. Fiend Celestial Lin's current situation could be described as being ambushed on all sides. He, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death, was doomed to die. The most frightening thing was that the major forces clearly regarded Lin Sun as a prey that had to die. They didn't make a move now because they were fighting for the ownership of the prey. This made Fiend Celestial Lin look very sad. In the past, he was so high-spirited and domineering that almost no one in the world of Burning Immortals dared to fight against him. But things had changed with the passage of time. Half a year had passed, and some cultivators had become kings, jumping out of the 5 realms and standing at a higher peak. As for Fiend Celestial Lin, no matter how heaven-defying he was, how could he be a match for a King Rel practitioner? Sure enough, as soon as he appeared, he was attacked by a King Rel practitioner and almost died. Even if he survived, he was seriously injured. Now, he was in such a desperate situation and was despised as a prey. Wasn't this a kind of sorrow? At this moment, countless spectators sighed in their hearts. A tiger that had fallen to the plains was bullied by a dog. This was probably the portrayal of the situation in front of them. Cut the crap. We must kill this fiend celestial Lin. In the field, the powerhouses of the Golden Crow lineage were very gloomy. They were unwilling to confront the other forces and directly attacked. Boom! Golden flames that filled the sky swept out. They were dazzling and incinerated the void. It was a golden-robed man who was extremely powerful and domineering. How dare you? Get lost. The other forces were naturally unwilling to accept this. They attacked Lin Sun at almost the same time. For a time, this area was covered by the dazzling light of treasures and endless Taoism. Heaven and earth wailed, and the weather changed. It was too terrifying. The cultivators in the distance were so shocked that they held their breath. How could Fiend Celestial Lin avoid such a siege? Many cultivators who admired Lin Sun couldn't bear to watch any longer. They felt sorrowful and felt sorry for Lin Sun. But very soon, there was a sudden change. At this moment, the courtyard where Lin Sun was suddenly surged with turbulent waves of restriction. Spiritual tattoo formations flickered and drowned out the attacks and treasures that covered the sky. Buzz, the formation glowed, magnificent and terrifying. Looking at the field again, Lin Sun was long gone. Obviously, he had hidden in the formation. Damn it, since when was there a restrictive formation here? The cultivators of the various sects were first stunned, and then their faces sank while they were livid with rage. This scene had completely exceeded their expectations. On the other hand, the cultivators that were watching the battle from afar were flabbergasted. Obviously, Fiend Celestial Lin set up a restriction formation here a long time ago. He probably did that to prevent this scene from occurring. Someone exclaimed with admiration and was convinced by Lin Sun's ability to prepare for a rainy day. Bang! Someone was disgruntled and withdrew a treasure to attack the courtyard. However, that treasure was like a stone that had been tossed into the ocean. It merely caused a ripple before vanishing without a trace. Not only were they unable to break through the formation, they even lost a treasure. This caused that person to be infuriated to the point of almost spitting blood. "Allow me." An expert of the Golden Crow clan roared loudly as he flapped his bright golden wings, causing surging flames to rumble and pour down towards the courtyard like tidewater. But it was still useless. On the contrary, it caused the Golden Crow clan expert to gasp endlessly for breath because he'd exhausted too much energy. The expressions of the experts of the various sects grew even more unsightly. In the past, Fiend Celestial Lin was sufficient to make anyone feel fearful. But now, he was clearly heavily injured and on the verge of death, yet he just had to flee into a restriction formation. How are they supposed to fight him? Let me give a try. An expert of the Myriad Bee Spirit Mountain moved out. His eyes suddenly turned a strange light silver color, and then they shot out two silver beams of light that charged into the restriction formation. After a short moment, this expert's expression turned gloomy as he gnashed his teeth and said, "This is the Azure Phoenix clan's 4-symbol king restriction, and it's sufficient to trap and kill kings. It's not that easy to destroy it all." As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of everyone present turned even gloomier, and they felt extremely terrible. A King Dao restriction formation. Who could have imagined that he, Fiend Celestial Lin, would possess such a skill? Damn it. Someone couldn't help but howl with rage. It was a superb opportunity to kill Fiend Celestial Lin, yet they were just a step away, yet it had been reduced to such a state. How could anyone not feel aggrieved? Didn't they say that the energy within the city would suppress the energy within the king domain? Someone asked. This is a King Dao restriction formation of formation. It's completely different from an existence within the king domain. Understand? Someone refuted. Stop arguing. Who cares what restriction it is? So long as we continue attacking it, it'll be sufficient to exhaust its energy. At that time, it'll be time to destroy the formation. The expert of the Golden Crow clan shouted loudly, and it caused everyone present to fall silent. Perhaps this was the stupidest method, yet it was undoubtedly the only method at present. Besides that, invite some spirit tattoo masters over and make the best use of our time to study the profundities of this formation. I don't believe we can destroy it. In next to no time, the various orthodoxies had taken action. No matter who it was, no one dared to delay. Because the longer they delayed, the more time Fiend Celestial Lin would have to recover. Once he was allowed to recover to his peak state, then just the thought of the consequences was chilling. After all, King Domain experts were unable to enter the city, and this meant that the greatest reliance of these orthodoxies would lose its deterrence. Who could stop Fiend Celestial Lin at his peak state? Quickly, attack with all your might. For a time, the surroundings rumbled incessantly. Numerous cultivators exerted all their strength to attack the four-symbol king restriction in order to exhaust the energy of the restriction. When a cultivator was completely exhausted and on the verge of being unable to hold on any longer, someone else would take his place and continue the siege. Rumble. This expanse of the heavens and the earth was rumbling while radiant and resplendent lights shot out incessantly like free fireworks. At the same time, a group of spirit tattoo masters were invited over to deduce and destroy the profundities of the four-symbol king restriction. This place was extremely bustling. The forces of the various orthodoxies converged incessantly here. Obviously, they were determined to kill Lin Sun, and they intended to eliminate Lin Sun with all their might. On the other hand, the entire Immortal Incineration City had fallen into an uproar and seething with excitement because of this. Countless cultivators had come to watch the battle after hearing the news. For a time, the courtyard Lin Sun resided in seemed to have become the center of attention of everyone and all the powers. Would Fiend Celestial Lin be able to escape calamity? Would the various orthodoxies be able to destroy the king's four-symbol king restriction? This was the question that everyone was most concerned about. However, all of this had nothing to do with Lin Sun anymore. After entering the courtyard, he activated the king's four-symbol king restriction at full power. He took out all his spiritual marrow to serve as the source of power for the formation and instructed Little Silver to guard it and pay attention to the situation at all times. Then he began to meditate with his legs crossed to heal his injuries. He didn't delay or waste any time at all. Beside him were the Calamity Divine Bamboo of the Black Sea Tengu clan, the Golden Wind Dew of the Holy Land of Lingbao, the Spirit Concentration Powder of the Sky-Reaching Sword Sect, the Stellar Aperture Recovery Pill of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, the Fountain of Youth of the Pure Land of Immortality, the Multicolored Chalcedony of the Blue Sea Taoism Sect. There were even bundles of king herbs. This time, Lin Sun threw caution to the wind and wanted to heal his injuries in the shortest time possible. At that time, it would be time for him to launch a counterattack. Chapter 1171. If he wanted to fight back, he must completely repair his Tao injury before the king's four symbols forbidden formation was broken. Otherwise, he would only die. Lin Sun didn't worry about it, nor did he think about the possibility of being killed. He always stayed calm in every major event. Over the years, he had experienced many life and death encounters, so it was impossible for him to be defeated by the danger in front of him. The Tao injury was like a crack on a delicate porcelain. It wasn't difficult to repair it. However, it was extremely difficult to restore it to its original, undamaged state. A few days ago, Lin Sun fell into the state of emptiness and completely found his own unique way of Tao. Originally, he lacked an opportunity to condense the Tao seed, so he could try to break through to the king's realm. But now, with the appearance of the Tao injury, his plan was disrupted. He was very clear that even if he repaired it, there would be a hidden danger in his Tao, which might become a fatal flaw when he condensed the Tao seed in the future. This was the injury brought to him by Miao Xin. A mere sword chi containing the power of King's Tao gave Lin Sun the most serious injury. How could Lin Sun not hate her? There could be no construction without destruction. In this case, it's better to rebuild my Tao. Lin Sun secretly made a decision. There was no time to hesitate at all. In the outside world, the king's four symbols forbidden formation was being attacked and cracked all the time. Time was too precious. In the past, I had rebuilt my Tao in the secret realm of Monster Saint in the ultimate ruins. Later, when I advanced to the reincarnation developing realm, I rebuilt it again. This time, I have made up for the flaws in my Tao and found the path I want to take. Whether I am injured or not, I need to rebuild my Tao. Lin Sun's mind was clear. He completely abandoned the distractions in his mind and began to act. Since the cracked porcelain couldn't be restored to its original state, he would break it and rebuild a more perfect porcelain with the means and perception he had mastered. Bang! The next moment, Lin Sun's chi burst like a balloon. His aura was suddenly weakened to the extreme, and his skin and hair were dim. It seemed that he had aged many years all of a sudden. This was destroying one's own cultivation. In the distance, Little Silver was alarmed, and when he saw this scene, his little face couldn't help changing abruptly. Is Master suffering from chi deviation? He was extremely anxious in his heart, yet he didn't dare to stop her at all as he was deeply afraid of alarming her and causing her to fall into eternal damnation. This was a tribulation of cultivation, and he had to overcome it himself. However, Little Silver didn't know that Lin Sun was taking the initiative to break his Tao and reshape it. Outside the king's four symbols restriction formation, rumbling resounded without end while divine radiance erupted like a waterfall. The cultivators of the various sects had already changed batch after batch, and they were ceaselessly attacking the Grand Formation with the intention of exhausting the strength of the Grand Formation. The reason was very simple. The circulation of the ruler's taboo required the support of energy. If it was unable to provide sufficient energy, then the might of the ruler's taboo would naturally weaken. At the same time, a group of spiritual tattooists gathered together and took out spiritual formation plates, tortoise shell, star wheels, and other secret treasures with spiritual tattoos. They were deducing the mystery of the king's four symbols forbidden formation and trying to break it. In the distance, there were even more experts from major forces waiting. However, their expressions faintly revealed impatience and anxiety. An entire day had already passed since they started attacking the restriction formation, yet they still achieved very little and didn't improve at all. So, how could they not be anxious? The more time passed, the greater the possibility of Lin Sun recovering from his injuries. A bunch of trash. An explosive shout resounded from a far outside, immortal incineration ancient city. Obviously, those King Realm experts that were unable to enter the city felt extremely aggrieved and were venting their displeasure. Before the restriction formation, the experts of the various powers felt extremely embarrassed and humiliated. A heavily injured fellow on the verge of death was clearly right before their eyes. Yet it just so happened that they were unable to kill him because of the formation. This was simply too torturous. Even further away from them, countless cultivators were watching from the sidelines. There were independent cultivators and experts from small powers. In the depths of their hearts, they really hoped that Lin Sun would be able to survive and show off his invincible might. Because during this period of time, the various powers had taken control of a mortal incineration ancient city, and so long as one entered the city, one had to pay a fee to enter the city. This caused these cultivators to harbor hatred in their hearts and feel aggrieved. If Lin Sun was alive, then he was bound to take revenge and slaughter everyone. At that time, the various powers were bound to suffer calamity. So, they hoped that Lin Sun would be able to survive. Besides these cultivators, there were also experts from other powers who were watching from the sidelines. They did not participate in this operation against Lin Sun. It wasn't that they were afraid, but there was no enmity between them. So why would they hit him when he was down? Perhaps Lin Sun's survival was enough to threaten them. But this was competition that existed everywhere. It was within reason, so they were not afraid. Lin Sun's death had nothing to do with them, and it wouldn't affect their future operations anyway. As for helping him, that was absolutely impossible. Helping him alone was equivalent to going against those major powers, and they would be greatly implicated. Only an idiot would do such a thankless thing. In short, Lin Sun's situation had affected the hearts of countless cultivators in a mortal incineration ancient city. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that everyone was watching. Some hoped that he would be alive, some hoped that he would die immediately, and some simply watched from the sidelines. But one thing was for sure. No one would choose to help Lin's son at this moment. Soon, 2 days passed. The Kingway restriction formation was still in operation, causing the various powers to be unable to make any progress in their attacks. The cultivators from these powers all had ugly expressions. The 3rd day passed quickly as well. Finally, the power of the Kingway restriction formation began to visibly weaken, which roused the spirits of those cultivators. Inside the formation, Little Silver was frowning. There wasn't much spiritual marrow left to provide power for the King's 4 symbols restriction formation, so it had to be used sparingly. Moreover, it could only last for 3 days at most. At this moment, Lin Sun's aura was withered, and he was like a clay statue. Only his long breaths proved that he was still alive. I don't know when Master will wake up, but no matter what, it doesn't matter even if I have to fight to the end and give up my life. Little Silver took a deep breath, and there was determination on his face. He was a descendant of the spirit-eating insects. Although he was extremely arrogant, once he recognized a master, he would never change his mind. Moreover, without Lin Sun, he wouldn't have been able to progress so quickly on the path of evolution. The 4th day, the power of the King's 4 symbols restriction formation was weakening. This made the cultivators from the major powers even more expectant, but they were also more anxious. It had already been 4 days. How much had Lin Sun recovered from his injuries? The 5th day, everyone's heart was burning with anxiety. The Kingway restriction formation was on the verge of collapse. Had Lin Sun recovered from his injuries? Puff! Amidst the silence, a spiritual tattooist suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, which shocked many people. But this spiritual tattooist danced with joy and laughed wildly. It's cracked. His words caused everyone to be agitated. Is it over? The expressions of the cultivators who were looking forward to Lin Sun's recovery changed abruptly, and a trace of sorrow surged in their hearts. It's finally over. The experts who had remained neutral heaved a sigh of relief. Waiting was undoubtedly torturous, and it consumed their patience bit by bit. Now that there was finally an outcome, they were invigorated. The cultivators from the major powers who were besieging the restriction formation couldn't restrain the ecstasy in their hearts at this moment. They shouted loudly, and some even felt like crying tears of joy. This war of attrition was really too torturous. Boom! Without any hesitation, under the guidance of the spiritual tattooist, a group of cultivators started to crack the formation together. The effect was remarkable. The King's 4 symbols restriction formation, which was on the verge of collapse, began to collapse under the efforts of the cultivators, and the spiritual tattoo formation dimmed. Good. The experts from the Golden Crow lineage, Xuandu Taoism sect, Beast Spirit Mountain, Sea Soul Clan, Moon-worshipping cult, and other major powers became excited, and their eyes burned with murderous intent. They were trapped here for 5 days in order to kill a seriously injured and dying demon godling. This made them feel angry and resentful, and they urgently needed to vent their anger. I'll definitely cut this kid into pieces and grind his bones to ashes later. A golden crow flapped its golden wings and gnashed its teeth, ready to attack at the first moment. Don't be anxious. Let me torture him first, and let him experience what it means to be in a state where he can neither live nor die. Lu Chuan of Beast Spirit Mountain's eyes were cold, and his expression was cold. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on it, and they held their breath in concentration. Boom! In the end, the King's 4 symbols formation shattered into pieces, and it rumbled as it collapsed to reveal the courtyard beneath it. This was half a day earlier than Little Silver had expected. But Little Silver did not panic, nor did he retreat. His expression was calm and resolute, and his handsome face was suffused with endless murderous intent. The soul sword on his back was silently pulled out by him. Behind him, Lin Sun was meditating in silence. He had not woken up from the beginning to the end, nor had he noticed the changes in the field, but that was no longer important. Little Silver only knew that he would stand in front, even if it meant death. "Ha ha, everyone, please take a look. This demon god Lin is still meditating. He hasn't woken up despite such a huge commotion. Someone laughed maniacally. I thought he had mostly recovered from his injuries. Who would have thought that his injuries were more serious than we imagined? The experts from the other major powers heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed. They looked at Lin's son as if they were staring at a dead man. How could this be? In the distance, countless cultivators widened their eyes in disbelief. It had already been 5 days, but Demon God Lin was still unable to recover from his injuries. Was he really destined to suffer a calamity this time, and there was no turning back? Kill! A golden crow expert rushed out. He had long been unable to restrain himself and attacked at the first instance. Like a golden bolt of lightning, he stepped on Lin Sun's head. This kind of attack was unscrupulous and humiliating. Chapter 1172. The one who acted first was the golden-robed young man who clamored to kill Lin Sun. He was decisive and ruthless. He stamped his foot to crush Lin Sun's head. Many strong men cursed in their hearts for being one step ahead of Lin Sun. But the next moment, their pupils shrank. The golden-robed young man was still in the air. He suddenly twitched and screamed like a wild beast. Then he fell to the ground with a thud and couldn't get up again. Until he died, his face was still full of anger, unwillingness, and panic, which made people shudder. The scene was a little silent for a while. Lin Sun sat on the ground, motionless. He didn't fight or even breathe, but the golden-robed young man died in front of all their eyes. From the beginning to the end, no one even saw how he died. This was undoubtedly very weird and horrifying. It's him. Suddenly, someone shouted and looked at the void in front of Lin Sun. There stood a little man a few inches high, dressed in a white robe and holding a soul sword in his hand. He looked extremely handsome. His whole body was illusory and transparent, and his breath was almost non-existent. If one didn't look carefully, he couldn't be found at all. This is a spirit-eating insect that has evolved to the level of latent king. It has molted and transformed. Someone gasped and was shocked to recognize Little Silver's identity. The pupils of other practitioners present also shrank suddenly. Spirit-eating insect. This was a peerless insect that could rank in the top 10 in ancient times. It was once famous in ancient times and made countless practitioners pale at the mention of it. But in front of them was a spirit-eating insect that had evolved to a latent king. This was even more terrifying and incredible, because in the eyes of the world, this insect had long been annihilated in the long river of time. Who would have thought that they would see a living one today? No wonder the golden-robed young man died so strangely. He was actually killed by a descendant of spirit-eating insect. For a moment, many practitioners looked at Little Silver with a trace of fear in their eyes. The terrible thing about spirit-eating insects was that they could kill the spirits silently, making it impossible for people to guard against them. Anyone who saw them would be afraid and be on full alert. But there were also people with blazing gazes. The God-Eater insect was the creature most suitable to be a battle servant. Not only did it possess heaven-defying talent, but once it rose to become a king, its battle prowess would definitely be extremely terrifying. In the face of countless gazes, Little Silver's expression was as cold as ever. He didn't waver in the slightest, nor did he take a step back. Logically speaking, if he were to turn invisible, no one would be able to detect him. With his talent, he would be able to catch his opponents off guard and kill them. But he had no choice but to show himself, because he had to protect Lin Sun. Without his deterrence, when he dealt with an enemy, other strong people would inevitably take advantage of the situation and kill Lin Sun. Therefore, he would rather lose his advantage if he exposed himself. Little guy, come with me. I can protect your life. Lu Chuan of the 10,000 Beasts Spiritual Mountain stood out with a fiery gaze, as if he had discovered a peerless treasure. The myriad Beast Spirit Mountain specialized in enslaving and controlling all kinds of exotic beasts and exotic insects. According to the ancient books of their sect, the spirit-eating insect was one of the most powerful insects known in the ancient Desolation realm. If they could subdue it, it would be no less than getting a sacred treasure of the sect. Little Silver glanced at him and didn't say a word. Lu Chuan became more and more excited. If he could subdue a spirit-eating insect at the hidden king level, it would be no different from getting a supreme fortune. Junior brothers and sisters, listen up. Let others kill Fiend Celestial Lin. Our goal is to capture that worm. Lu Chuan took a deep breath and gave the order. Behind him, a group of strong people responded loudly. As the descendants of the 10,000 Bee spiritual mountain, they naturally understood the value of the spirit-eating insect. Moreover, they were better at dealing with this kind of exotic insect. Lu Chuan made such a decision. Although the other forces were dissatisfied, they finally held back their dissatisfaction. Their top priority now was to kill Demon Lin. If the spirit-eating insect could be restrained by Lu Chuan and others, it would no longer be a threat to them. Little guy, come here. Lu Chuan turned over his hand, and a blood-colored earthen jar appeared in his hand. It was extremely old and steamed with a strange and frightening fierce aura. Whoosh! The earthen jar rose up and splashed blood-colored divine splendor, which shrouded Little Silver. Little Silver didn't dodge. He slashed with his sword, and a wisp of soul sword essence shot out. In an instant, the blood-colored divine splendor was shattered. But this made Lu Chuan happy instead of surprised. He shouted, "Good. You've awakened the spirit-eating sword essence in your bloodline. How rare." Boom! As he spoke, he and the group of strong people from the 10,000 Bee spiritual mountain behind him had already started a fight. It had to be said that Lu Chuan and others were very skilled. The secret methods and treasures they used were all specially aimed at Little Silver. In an instant, they firmly suppressed Little Silver. A head-on confrontation was never his forte. As a spirit-eating insect, he was born to kill the soul and could kill the opponent's spirit by surprise. But now, in order to protect Lin Sun, he had lost his own advantage. He didn't dare to rush out and could only defend and counterattack. But in this way, he suddenly couldn't resist. This was very frustrating, but Little Silver didn't flinch. He went all out and fought with all his might. Let's kill Demon Lin. The cultivators of other forces couldn't wait. Seeing that Little Silver was restrained, they completely relaxed and attacked brazenly. How dare you? Little Silver shouted angrily. Finally, he couldn't calm down and tried desperately to stop them. Little guy, you'd better stay here obediently. Lu Chuan laughed and used all his strength to firmly suppress Little Silver with the other senior and junior brothers. This made Little Silver so angry that he was about to go crazy and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Boom! In his field of vision, the cultivators of other forces had already rushed to attack, sacrificing all kinds of treasures and displaying powerful secret methods. There had never been a moment when Little Silver had felt so helpless. He hated it. He hated it so much that blood was dripping from the corners of his eyes. Then, he resolutely ignored the attacks coming at him and rushed to Lin Sun, trying to block all the attacks at the risk of his life. The dignity of the spirit-eating insect and its recognition and gratitude to Lin Sun made him choose this kind of generous action without hesitation. In the distance, the cultivators who had been paying close attention to the battle couldn't help but be greatly shocked and moved. Little Silver, I've woken up. But at this extremely dangerous moment, a familiar voice rang in Little Silver's ears, which startled him at first and then made him ecstatic. His master had finally woken up. At the same time as the voice rang out, a figure seemed to flash out of thin air, stood in front of Little Silver, and stretched out his hand. An invisible abyss emerged in the void. All the Taoist magic attacks from all directions were annihilated and disappeared in the abyss like illusions. All the treasures exploded inch by inch like paper paste, turning into a rain of light all over the sky. In a flash, the abyss appeared. It engulfed everything. Rumble. In this world, the abyss rotated, causing the void to collapse inch by inch, and the rumbling sound shook the ninth heaven. In front of the abyss, Lin Sun's figure floated in the air, his black eyes deep and his whole body clear and ethereal, like a banished immortal. Everyone was caught off guard. Their hearts trembled and they were a little confused. Demon God Lin had actually woken up from meditation. This was unexpected. Originally, when Lin Sun meditated in silence, he was regarded as too seriously injured, and the experts of the major forces wanted to be the first to kill him. Who would have thought that the situation would be reversed now? For a moment, the experts of the major forces besieging Lin Sun were a little surprised and doubtful. Was he holding on, or had he completely recovered? In the distance, the crowd of spectators was in an uproar. I knew it. Demon God Lin isn't so easy to kill. Many people cried out in excitement. Even those who remained neutral and watched coldly from the sidelines couldn't help but be stunned, caught off guard by this sudden scene. Master, Little Silver was excited. He had already made up his mind to sacrifice himself. I've seen everything that happened just now. Little Silver, come back. Now you'll see how I kill them all. Lin Sun's expression was indifferent. She flowed all over his body, with an invisible sense of perfection and emptiness. In his body, his essence, chi, and spirit surged and rumbled. All the power ran on its own, like a raging furnace. Once it erupted, it would definitely burn the universe. No one knew that he had already reconstructed his Taoism for the third time and reached an unprecedented level of perfection in one fell swoop. He was even more powerful than before. Arrogant, you're on the verge of death, but you still dare to talk big. A powerhouse of Xuandu Taoism shouted, Everyone, don't be fooled by this guy. I've already found out that it's impossible for him to recover from his Taoist injury within 5 days. He looks unscathed, but in fact, he's only strong in appearance. There's nothing to fear. Taoist injury. The eyes of all the cultivators present flickered. Anyone with a little common sense of cultivation would know that Taoist injury was the most terrible injury. To completely recover was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Everyone, regardless of anything else, we can't let Demon God Lin live today. The powerhouse of Golden Crow also spoke in a low voice. In fact, there was no need to remind them. Everyone knew that as long as Demon God Lin was alive, he would be the most serious threat to the major forces. If they didn't kill him now, no one could bear the consequences. The powerhouses of the major forces surrounded and sealed off the area. Their auras roared, their killing intent wandered, and their eyes were cold. Just you? Lin Sun's black eyes swept the distance, as if to confirm how many enemies there were. His attitude was a great provocation in the eyes of those who regarded him as prey. What did he mean? Did he think they weren't enough to be feared? He was too arrogant. Lin Sun, as long as you hand over that spirit-eating bug, we B-Spirit Mountain promise not to make things difficult for you. Lu Chuan's face was gloomy. He was unwilling to give up, and he was still worried about Little Silver. Don't talk so much nonsense. Kill him first. Some powerhouses couldn't help but attack. Treasure light rose up, and Taoist magic rained down on Lin Sun. There were also many powerhouses guarding the surroundings, sealing off the area, as if they were worried that Lin Sun would escape again. You must have been suffering waiting these days. In that case, I'll send you on your way. At this moment, a cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. His body emitted a brilliant light, and his aura suddenly became extremely terrifying. Today, he would start a killing spree. P.S. First update. I heard that monthly votes can increase Demon God Lin's combat index. Chapter 1173. In an instant, Lin Sun seemed as if he'd transformed into a completely different person. His aura was like an abyss, and it caused the surrounding space to collapse and sink. Everyone's souls palpitated, and they were on the verge of kneeling on the ground. This was a form of innate reverence, and it was absolute deterrence in terms of strength. What's going on? Could it be that he's completely recovered from his injuries? Someone cried out with shock. Bang! A completely round divine halo formed around Lin Sun. As it revolved, it was like an abyss had descended into the world, and it made him seem like a god. Pooh! The bodies of the experts that charged at Lin Sun at the first possible moment exploded apart and were blasted flying. They were suppressed by the light around Lin Sun, causing their flesh and blood to explode and transform into ash. They were unable to approach him at all. Their attacks and treasures were crushed into powder, and a rain of light fluttered about. This sort of arrogance might immediately deterred everyone present, causing every single expert to be shocked to the point their scalps went numb, and they simply didn't dare believe their eyes. The light was like a divine halo that transformed into an abyss. A young man with an icy cold and indifferent expression emanated a world-shaking aura, and he seemed like a dominator. Kill. Under their shock and rage, the cultivators of the various powers didn't dare hesitate, and they attacked without the slightest hesitation. Moreover, they even utilized their entire strengths. Lin Sun strode forward. With him as the center, the clear light of the Tao was brilliant like a river of stars, and it flickered in the surroundings in a dazzling and resplendent manner. Rumble. He didn't attack at all. Merely the energy that erupted from his body covered the heavens and the earth, and it swept through the surroundings, causing space to explode apart and the heavens and the earth to wail. In the blink of an eye, a rain of blood sprayed down like a waterfall, and shrill cries resounded along with it. All the experts that charged over were crushed like pieces of paper. They seemed to be besieging him, yet they were actually unable to obstruct Lin Sun's footsteps at all. It looked like moths flying into a flame instead. Why is it like this? Why? Many people trembled while their hearts went cold. They were stimulated by this bloody scene, and they felt terrified in their hearts. How can we resist such divine might? The cultivators that were watching the battle from afar gasped and were dumbstruck. 5 days ago, demon god Lin, who'd been silent for half a year, had made an appearance. However, he was immediately attacked by the joint forces of 4 King Realm experts, causing him to be heavily injured and on the verge of death. This was seen as a sign that Fiend God Lin was about to perish. It also made countless cultivators feel pity and sorrow for him. 5 days later, the king's restriction array was cracked. The various factions scrambled to kill Fiend Celestial Lin immediately. Under such circumstances, everyone believed that Demon God Lin was doomed. The battle that had garnered the attention of the entire city would also come to an end with Demon God Lin's death. But who would have thought that everything would change? Not only was Fiend God Lin, who was seen to be at the end of his rope and had suffered irreparable Tao injuries, not only not killed, he seemed to have been reborn from the ashes as he revealed an astounding brilliance. This was undoubtedly too inconceivable and shocking, and it was simply like they were witnessing a miracle being born right before their eyes. Boom! Lin Sun stepped in the void, like a demon descending to the world, rushing to kill his opponent. Strictly speaking, he was crushing his opponent, because along with every step he took, all of his opponents were crushed on the spot like clay chickens. Not to mention struggling, they didn't even have the strength to resist. To the spectators, this might be shocking and inconceivable. But to Lin Sun, too much hatred and anger had accumulated in his heart since 5 days ago. He would never forget the thrilling scene of being besieged by 4 King Realms in front of the city gate. He would never forget the heavy injuries and encirclement he had suffered. At that time, even some irrelevant cultivators dared to think of him as a fat sheep and try to kill him. At that time, the experts of the various factions were aggressive and saw him as prey. They confronted each other just to fight for the chance to kill him first. Then what did they take him for? Or was it because he had been too soft-hearted in the past and hadn't killed enough? Especially when he saw that Silver had resolutely chosen to die in order to protect him, it completely ignited the accumulated hatred and anger in Lin Sun's heart. Now, what he needed was to vent his anger. Boom! The world was filled with a rain of blood and screams. It was as if it had turned into purgatory. Quick, stop him, someone roared. However, it was useless. Lin Sun's body was blazing and flowing with Taoist light. He killed enemies in all directions with every move he made. Bastard, how dare you? A peerless talent of the Golden Crow branch rushed out. He was a man in a gray robe with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was extremely heroic and majestic. Lin Sun glanced at him and waved his hand. The man in a gray robe was swept over. No! His face suddenly changed, and he roared. His figure suddenly turned into a golden crow. He flapped his wings and tried to escape. However, no matter how fiercely he struggled, it was in vain. In front of Lin's son, even though he was a peerless figure, he was still too weak. Rip! The next moment, his wings were torn off by Lin's son, and blood rained down. Everyone was overwhelmed with shock. This wasn't an ordinary apex figure, but now, he was being torn apart alive like a little chick. This was the difference between a firefly and the bright moon. He was not qualified to compete at all. Damn it! The overmatch of the Golden Crow clan shouted angrily. That was one of their core figures, but he was killed in such a stupid way. Whoosh! As Lin's son moved forward, he suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed a black shuttle. It was extremely insidious and ruthless, and it swept over from the Sea Soul clan. Lin's son didn't even look at it. With a shake of his hand, the black shuttle flew back like a flash of black lightning. With a puff, it killed a man in black hiding in the crowd. In front, several overmatches of the moon-worshipping cult came together. Taking advantage of this opportunity, they presented thousands of sharp blades like the crescent moon. Each sharp blade was cold and incomparably sharp. Thousands of them formed a saber formation, which made people's scalp numb. "Get out," Lin's son said. It could be seen that the invisible sound wave turned into the Pu Lao divine beast and rose into the air. With a bang, it blew up the saber formation. None of the descendants of the moon-worshipping cult escaped. Their souls were directly shattered, and they died with blood flowing out of their 7 orifices. People's hearts trembled. What kind of terrible power was this? With a loud shout, he killed several overmatches. It was the first time for many people to see Lin Sun's power. Their eyes almost fell out, and they realized that Demon Lin was even more terrible than the rumors. Some overmatches who had already seen Lin Sun's fighting power couldn't calm down at this moment. Compared with the seriously injured and dying 5 days ago, Demon Lin at this time had obviously become more powerful. This part of the world had become a bloody battlefield, and screams could be heard incessantly. Lin Sun alone swept across the field. He was invincible, unstoppable, and invincible. Wherever he went, he left a ground full of corpses, broken treasures, and miserable screams. This was not a battle, but a massacre. The overmatches of the major forces were all frightened by Lin Sun's killing. They screamed in fear and were defeated. They rushed in all directions and were about to flee, because they were completely afraid. This kind of fierce power was irresistible and could suppress everything. It made their fighting spirit collapse. Who dared to court death? Seeing this, Lin Sun suddenly took a deep breath and said indifferently, "Today, none of you can leave." His voice was not loud, but it resounded through the whole field, full of invisible majesty, as if the ruler had issued an unquestionable decree. Boom! As soon as Lin Sun's voice fell, an invisible restrictive force suddenly spread with Lin Sun as the center, like a storm sweeping across the universe. In an instant, a shocking scene happened. The figures that were fleeing in all directions were like insects stuck in a large net, trapped in place. They maintained their original posture, either stepping on the conveyance light or rushing forward on the ground. Everyone's face was full of uncontrollable panic, which looked extremely strange. This was the Bashia prohibition, but its power had been exerted to an unprecedented extreme by Lin Sun. Boom! Lin Sun's black eyes swept around, tearing the void like lightning. At this moment, he seemed to be the ruler of the life and death of all living beings. He raised his hand and clenched it gently. The imprisoned figures all exploded at the same time and turned into flying ashes under the killing power of the Bashia prohibition. Looking from a distance, this world really seemed to have fallen into a torrential rain of blood. The void was dyed red, which was extremely dazzling. The practitioners watching the battle in the distance opened their mouths wide and were stunned. This kind of power didn't seem to be possessed by an overmatch of the reincarnation developing realm. It was too frightening. Some ancient freaks and peerless geniuses hiding in the crowd originally had the mentality of watching the fun, but when they witnessed this blow, they were also shocked, and their faces changed suddenly. Could this man already be a king at the peak? Being a king and becoming a king were two different concepts. But being a king at the peak was undoubtedly the most terrible. It meant that Lin Sun already had the foundation to be invincible among his peers and suppress all enemies on the peerless road of the reincarnation developing realm. At this time, those overmatches who hadn't escaped were almost frightened to the point of collapse. Before, they all thought that Lin Sun was seriously injured and dying, so they could slaughter him at will and regarded him as prey. But they never thought that he would show such terrible power. It was also at this moment that they remembered that the young man in front of them was a demon-level figure who was famous for killing in the outside world. They also remembered that when he just entered the burning celestial realm, he broke into the territory of Golden Crow, looted their treasure house, and even killed 26 dazzling top figures in the Fenshin Valley. How could they compete with such a figure? Lin Sun, aren't you afraid of the revenge of the overmatches of the King Realm in our forces? Someone roared. It was Lu Chuan of the Beast Mountain. Puff! Lin Sun turned around, and a Swanee seal rose into the air and pressed down. Lu Chuan tried his best to resist, but it was in vain. He was crushed, and his body burst into pieces. Then, Lin Sun said, "When I become a king, I will settle accounts with those lowlifes outside the city." Everyone was horrified. A group of King Realm experts was regarded as lowlifes by Demon God Lin. This was undoubtedly very domineering. The killing was still going on. This time, Lin Sun didn't intend to show any mercy. He wanted to completely eliminate all enemies in the city. Lin Sun, enough is enough. It's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Why are you so ruthless? Suddenly, a white-haired man rushed out of the crowd, watching the battle in the distance, and said indifferently, trying to stop this killing. Chapter 1174. The white-haired man wore a suit of shining silver armor. His body was tall and slender, giving off a divine aura. This seems to be an ancient freak who crossed realms to enter the upper 9 realms from the burning celestial realm. Yes, his name is Di Fengshan, an ancient freak from an ancient orthodoxy in the South Mysterious world. He's extremely powerful. The crowd was agitated as they recognized the white-haired man. However, no one had expected that he would stand out at this moment to dissuade Lin from continuing. "You want to stop me?" Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. "I'm not trying to stop you. I just don't want too many casualties. It's against the harmony of heaven," Di Fengshan said indifferently. "Then let me ask you, why didn't you stand out to stop the descendants of these great forces from besieging me in the past 5 days? Lin Sun's black eyes became colder and colder. The moment that was said, all the spectators agreed with him. Why was Fiend God Lin allowed to be killed by others and not others? What the hell was against the harmony of heaven? He was obviously biased. Di Fengshan's face darkened. "Lin Sun, I'm helping you resolve your grievances. Is this your attitude? Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to resolve grievances? Get out of here if you don't want to die." Lin Sun spoke bluntly, and his words were loud and clear. Di Fengshan's face suddenly became gloomy. Being scolded by Lin Sun in such a way under the watchful eyes of the public made him feel ashamed and angry. "Are you really going to continue to be stubborn?" He took a deep breath. Lin Sun didn't bother to pay attention to him. He was just a clown. Why should he care about him? Boom! With a flick of his sleeve, a burning river of stars unfurled in the void, and he continued his massacre. The place fell into chaos again. Blood rained, and the sound of killing shook the sky. Lin Sun was like a tiger in a pack of wolves, killing all the heroes here. These powerful forces came for him. He couldn't show them any mercy. They slaughtered all along the way, causing the streets here to be covered in corpses that were soaked in scarlet-red pools of blood. It was a horrifying and terrifying scene. These powerful forces had long been scared out of their wits. They were all fleeing. However, how could they escape from Lin Sun, who was like a demon? In the distance, Defunction's expression changed indeterminately as he felt an unprecedented sense of humiliation in his heart. He was ignored like this. In the past, he'd never experienced such a feeling, especially when the nearby spectators were occasionally glancing at him, as if they were looking at a clown, and it caused him to feel extremely uncomfortable. "Stop!" Defunction couldn't restrain himself any longer and shouted, "Lin Sun, you really don't take me seriously." In the slaughter, Lin Sun said without looking back, "You want me to look up to you? Fine, you can go outside the city now and persuade those scum like King Chung to apologize to me. I promise to treat you differently." Defunction was enraged. This was clearly making fun of him. "Scram if you can't do it." Defunction was not polite at all, which made many onlookers secretly happy. Defunction thought too highly of himself. Who did he think he was to order Demon God Lin to stop? Simply arrogant, conceited, and self-righteous. "It seems that you don't want to give me face. In that case, I'd like to experience your skills." Defunction's face darkened. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Sun had already rushed him. He clenched his palm and fingers into a fist and punched out across the air. At that moment, the fist force was like a dragon, collapsing the universe. It was so fast that Defunction, who had just said tough words and was about to make a move, was caught unprepared and could only try his best to resist. Bang! In the earth-shattering sound of the collision, Defunction, an ancient freak, staggered and flew out like a kite with a broken string. In the process, his chest heaved up and down. He couldn't help coughing up blood and fell to the ground awkwardly. "How dare you come out to clamor with such little ability? You're courting death." Lin Sun's eyes were indifferent. He didn't even bother to look at Defunction. He turned around and continued to kill. Defunction instantly noticed that countless gazes had descended onto him, and these gazes carried a sense of ridicule, pity, and sorrow. This made his cheeks turn purple, and he wanted to find a hole to hide in. Witnessing this scene, other ancient freaks and geniuses hiding in the dark all gasped, and their faces became extremely dignified. He suppressed Defunction with one punch. Just how powerful was this demon god Lin? It was chaos in the field. Screams rang out incessantly, and there were figures fleeing everywhere. How could this be? In the distance, a group of practitioners rushed over. Obviously, they were the reinforcements of those orthodoxies. Boom! Lin Sun's eyes flashed with cold lightning. 9 tribulation words appeared around him, which were golden as if they were made of gold. Surrounded by the ultimacy of the real dragon, they rushed to the sky. On the spot, several leading practitioners were killed by the tribulation words, and their corpses fell to the ground. Behind them, the practitioners who came to help were so frightened that they turned around and fled even faster. They wished their parents had given them 2 more legs. Run! The crowd was so frightened that they fled in all directions. There was no way to fight this battle. The power of Demon Lin couldn't be shaken at all unless a King Realm practitioner took action. But sadly, a King Realm practitioner couldn't enter the city. "Demon Lin, you're courting death. Do you dare to come out and fight?" A furious shout sounded from outside the city and resounded in the sky. It was Wu Yuanjin, a King Realm practitioner of the Golden Crow bloodline. He was standing in the sky outside the city with a livid expression. He was so angry that he was about to go mad. Miao Tsin of Xuandu Taoism, Shang Chong of the Sea Soul tribe, Wang Yuntong of the moon-worshipping cult, and other King Realm practitioners were gathered there. Their faces were extremely ugly, and they were burning with anger. They wished they could rush into the city and kill Lin Sun. Hearing Wu Yuanjin shout, the spectators' expressions changed. Did he think Demon Lin was a fool? Would he walk out of the city to die? What an idiot. Don't worry. When I become a King Realm practitioner, none of you will be able to escape. Lin Sun glanced into the distance. His figure was indifferent and emotionless, but the coldness in his words made many practitioners' hearts tremble. Then, Lin Sun didn't stop. He stepped on the corpses of the practitioners and chased after them alone. Today, he wanted to wash the practitioners of the orthodoxies with blood. The entire ancient city of immortal incineration was shaken, and countless practitioners were shocked. If one looked down from the sky, one would be able to see the crowd of practitioners being routed like tidewater, and they were fleeing towards all directions. On the other hand, Lin Sun left behind an expanse of corpses and blood all along his path of pursuit. It was like a line of blood that was spreading through the city, and it was a horrifying sight. This caused all the independent cultivators and disciples of the small powers to feel excited. During this period of time, numerous great powers had taken control of immortal incineration, and they'd been acting supreme and imposing entrance fees at the entrance of the city. It had caused countless practitioners to feel resentful and displeased. Yet now, when they saw Demon God Lin push them aside and flee in panic like stray dogs, how could they not feel excited? If it wasn't out of consideration for the occasion, they would have cheered and cheered for Lin Sun a long time ago. Moreover, all of them coincidentally followed behind Lin Sun because they wanted to witness his actions today. The city was in chaos. All sorts of streaks flashed about chaotically as they fled for their lives. On the other hand, Lin Sun attacked mercilessly from behind. Every single step he took seemed like he'd shrunk the earth into an inch, and his speed was inconceivably swift. At this moment, he was like a god of death, and he'd opened up a path of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. With a raise of his hand, his enemies would surely die a violent death on the battlefield. During this entire process, the shouts of kings, threats, and curses resounded incessantly from outside the city, and it reverberated in the sky above immortal incineration. But all of this couldn't make Lin Sun's footsteps stop even once. His expression was terrifyingly calm, and his black eyes were filled with gloomy, killing intent. Pooh! 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 Along the way, a rain of blood splattered from time to time, and corpses fell to the ground. Lin Sun was never one to kill the innocent indiscriminately. Therefore, the moment he awakened, he hadn't been in a hurry to make a move. It was for the sake of remembering those great powers that were against him, and then he would get even with them one by one. All the practitioners that followed behind him felt their scalps go numb, and their hearts palpitated with fear. He was too domineering. Those at the peak of the reincarnation development realm were like divine dragons in the sky, but such figures were like decorations before Demon God Lin, and they couldn't even be killed. Run! Demon God Lin has awakened, and he's even stronger than before. We can't fight him head-on. How? How could this be? All the heroes fled, and the immortal incineration ancient city became chaotic. This made everyone dumbfounded, because in the past, the heirs of these great powers were all high and mighty. Who had ever seen them being killed like this? Moreover, they were defeated by one person. During this process, some reinforcements arrived, but they quickly sensed the danger, and they retreated immediately, not bothering to rescue them. In this massacre, some people were lucky enough to escape from the city, and they narrowly escaped. But to them, the previous scenes were destined to be like a nightmare, and it would become a shadow in their hearts that they would never be able to erase in this lifetime. Hurry up and report that Demon God Lin is going on a killing spree. Tell everyone to run. Hurry, get out of the city. Screams rang out incessantly. The city was in chaos. This was unprecedented. In the past, there had never been such a tragic pursuit. How many people had died along the way? No one knew. Moreover, it was impossible to count because Lin Sun hadn't stopped since the beginning. He had already killed his way to the places where the great powers were entrenched in the city. Oh no, Demon God Lin is coming. Damn it, how can he be so terrifying when he's alone? The places where the great powers were entrenched were in chaos. They were extremely shocked, and they couldn't accept it for a moment. Didn't they say that Demon God Lin was dead for sure and was about to be executed? Why was the situation reversed now? And Demon God Lin was coming. Outside the city, the King Realm powerhouses were about to go mad from anger. Was Demon God Lin planning to kill them all and destroy their lair? The cultivators that followed behind Lin Sun all the way felt their hearts tremble. They originally thought that this massacre was about to come to an end, but who could have imagined that Lin Sun's stance made it seem like he wanted to flatten the territories of the various large factions? This is too crazy. Even an ancient freak that had been watching from the sidelines was dumbfounded and somewhat dumbfounded. Fiend God Lin was very ferocious. This was something everyone had heard of in the past, but they never expected him to be this ferocious. Someone had a premonition that from this day forth, the immortal incineration ancient city would change. Chapter 1175. Run, Demon Lin is coming for us. The place where Xuandu Taoism was located was an extremely magnificent ancient palace that occupied a large area. In the past, this place was like a forbidden place and ordinary cultivators did not dare to approach it. However, at this moment, the hall was filled with endless shouts and chaos. The successors of Xuandu Taoism fled in panic, feeling as if the sky had collapsed. They did not expect that the operation to encircle and annihilate Demon Lin would suddenly become like this. However, Lin Sun came too fast. He set foot on this place at the first moment and started killing. Puff, puff, puff. Many strong cultivators were killed like weeds, and blood splashed everywhere. Some people tried to escape, but they were killed by Lin Sun before they could go far. This was obviously a ruthless extermination. The spectators who followed up from afar were shocked, and their hearts trembled. Demon Lin's killing spree was to destroy the foundation of Xuandu Taoism in the Absolute region. It should be known that the reason why the ancient orthodoxies mobilized so many people to enter the Absolute region was to dig up and plunder a large number of opportunities to support their sects and improve their strength. Once their territory was destroyed, a sect plan to conquer the Apex region would be destroyed along with it. Kill! Lin Sun rushed forward all the way with his black hair flying in the air. He showed his absolute and unparalleled combat power, like a hot knife through butter. Soon, the vicinity of the ancient and magnificent building was full of blood, wreckage, and shrill screams. It was like purgatory on earth. Outside the city, when Miao Xin, the newly promoted king of Xuandu Taoism, heard the news, she was so angry that she coughed up blood on the spot and let out a shocking scream. She regretted it. She regretted not killing Lin Sun when he first appeared 5 days ago. Now, Lin Sun was the first to set foot on the territory of Xuandu Taoism. Obviously, this was revenge against her. Wu Yuanjin, Shang Chong, Wang Yuntong, and the other King Realm powerhouses who belonged to different forces all had ugly expressions at this moment. 5 days ago, Lin Sun was regarded as a weak insect by them, and they encircled and annihilated him. Who would have thought that 5 days later, this insect launched a bloody revenge? Puff! The force of his fist swept through the ancient hall. Along with the death of another cultivator, there wasn't a single person left standing besides Lin Sun. The ground was littered with corpses. The experts who watched this scene felt their scalps go numb. They realized that from today onwards, even if there were any surviving cultivators from the Xuandu Dao sect, the situation was over. Whoever dares to lay a finger on the treasures here will be my enemy. Suddenly, Lin Sun turned around, and his dark and cold gaze swept past the spectators, causing their bodies to stiffen while their hearts trembled. Among them, there were indeed experts with the intention of fishing in troubled waters and trying to take advantage of the situation to reap benefits. After all, this was the territory of the Xian capital Dao sect. During this period of time, they plundered a huge amount of treasures, and it was sufficient to cause anyone to covet and be envious. But after being warned by Lin Sun, they felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured on them, and the greed in their hearts was completely extinguished. Although the treasure was good, it was nothing compared to becoming enemies with Fiend God Lin. Whoosh! After that, Lin Sun floated away. He had to make the best use of his time and kill as many enemies as he could. Otherwise, once the other sects reacted, they would definitely flee the city at the first possible moment. Little Silver, stay here and collect the treasures, then meet up with me. Before leaving, Lin Sun left Little Silver behind. Humans' greed was the most terrifying. It might be suppressed, but it was very difficult to eradicate it. As the saying goes, humans die for wealth, and birds die for food. 5 days ago, when Lin Sun was seriously injured and on the verge of death, any random cultivator dared to regard him as a fat sheep. It could be seen that all kinds of despicable and ugly things would happen under the influence of greed. Among the spectators, there might be many who were happy to see him slaughter everyone. But Lin Sun would never let them take advantage of him. In these 5 days, he was besieged by various forces, but no one jumped out to help him. Now, they still wanted to follow behind him and take advantage of him? Impossible. Lin Sun left quickly, and he used his extreme speed to sweep through all the way again. He killed his way into the territory of the beast's spiritual mountain, and he crushed all the enemies with his divine might. Fortunately, when these forces chose their residences, they were all located in the central area of the city. The distance was not far, so Lin Sun didn't have to make too many turns and save a lot of time. Before long, the territory of the beast's spiritual mountain was breached, and blood flowed like a river. Previously, this orthodoxy had tried to suppress Little Silver and even forced him to sacrifice himself. Lin Sun naturally wouldn't let them go so easily. Outside the city, the eyes of a ruler from the 10,000 Beasts spiritual mountain had turned red. He was so angry that his teeth were about to shatter. This revenge was definitely a heavy blow to their 10,000 Beasts spiritual mountain. Soon, the territory of the Sea Soul clan was breached, and then the territory of the moon-worshipping cult. In a hurry, many cultivators of these forces didn't have time to escape. In addition, Lin Sun was too fast, so the casualties were no less than those of Xuandu Taoism and the Beast spiritual mountain. Outside the city, the kings were roaring, almost going crazy with anger. But the restriction of the immortal incineration ancient city suppressed their strength, so they couldn't enter the city at all. They could only watch everything happen. This was simply too torturous. Who would have thought that the seriously injured and dying demon god Lin would launch such a bloody counterattack in just 5 days? Moreover, from the looks of it, he was clearly going to massacre the major forces and completely uproot their foundations in the immortal incineration ancient city. However, no matter how fast Lin Sun was, as the news spread, many forces still retreated in advance. For example, the Golden Crow lineage, the Mystic Light ancient clan, and so on. Despite this being the case, the slaughter he carried out was still too ghastly and shocking. When news of this completely spread, the territories of 6 orthodoxies were destroyed. This caused everyone to be shocked, and there were some who didn't believe it, because Lin Sun's speed was too fast. He charged and killed in succession as easily as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He was simply like a storm passing through, and everywhere he passed, experts were all annihilated. The immortal incineration ancient city was in turmoil. It had been nearly half a year since the opening of the zone of extinction, and there had never been such a bloody battle. There were millions of cultivators in the city, but only a few could witness Lin Sun's conquest with their own eyes. Most of the other cultivators couldn't believe it when they heard the news. Not only was demon god Lin not dead, but he had also destroyed the territories of many orthodoxies along the way. It was as if he was really a demon god. This is too powerful, isn't it? Didn't he suffer a Tao injury and was destined to die? How could he sweep through the crowd and uproot the territories of several orthodoxies? My God, this is absolutely world-shaking news. After being silent for half a year, demon god Lin rose again and dyed the ancient city with blood. Just how powerful is he now? The news swept and raged in the immortal incineration ancient city like a hurricane. Everyone trembled, and many cultivators were excited to the point of trembling. They felt their blood boiling, and they felt unprecedentedly delighted. During this period of time, the orthodoxies controlled the immortal incineration ancient city, and in order to plunder and collect fortunes and opportunities, they did everything they could, which made them resentful and aggrieved. Lin Sun's bloody massacre directly caused the blood of those major forces to flow like a river. Who wouldn't be delighted? The absolute peak can be called a king. Otherwise, how can he be so powerful? Some ancient freaks and peerless geniuses were surprised and doubtful, and they were analyzing and speculating about Lin Sun's current combat strength. Let's wait and see. He will definitely enter the Tower of Extinction. At that time, it will be enough to find out his real strength by looking at his ranking. Someone made such a prediction. There were numerous tests in the Tower of Extinction, and only those ranked in the top 1,000 would be qualified to enter the upper 9 realms. Of course, those who became kings could also enter the upper 9 realms. However, for those talents who aspired to reach the peak of the king realm, entering the upper 9 realms through the Tower of Extinction was the right way. Because in the past half a year, after a lot of analysis and speculation, everyone came to a conclusion. It wasn't impossible to reach the peak of the king realm in the 3,000 realms, but it was too remote and rare. It required heaven-defying fortunes. However, the heaven-defying fortunes in the 3,000 realms were limited, and there was at most one in each realm. It was even to the extent that such heaven-defying fortunes didn't exist in many realms. Therefore, for most of the top figures, entering the upper 9 realms was the right way to reach the peak of the king realm. Lin Sun hadn't become a king yet, so it was determined that he would definitely go to the Tower of Extinction before the 1-year deadline arrived. From today onward, so long as Lin Sun doesn't leave the city, which cultivator in the city dares to be his enemy? More people sighed with emotion. They realized that the situation in the immortal incineration ancient city had changed. Even the orthodoxies and forces that hadn't provoked demon god Lin didn't dare to provoke him at this time. The city was in turmoil, and it wasn't peaceful outside the city either. The group of kings roared in anger. The cultivators from the major forces that had fled the city were livid, and they were both shocked and furious. Lin Sun had single-handedly killed them, and they had no choice but to flee the city to save their lives. This was undoubtedly a great shame and humiliation, but everyone knew that as long as demon god Lin didn't leave the city, they were bound to be helpless against him. Just wait. In half a year, the passageway to the upper 9 realms will open. As long as demon god Lin dares to go there, it'll be time for us to take revenge. Wu Yuanjin gnashed his teeth, and his killing intent surged. The other kings were tempted as well. Yes, as long as they endured for half a year and entered the upper 9 realms, demon god Lin would no longer be able to hide under the protection of the immortal incineration ancient city. But if we don't enter the city, how can we be ranked in the top 1,000 of the Tower of Extinction? A peerless figure couldn't help but say. His words caused the hearts of the remaining peerless powerhouses of the ancient orthodoxies to sink, and they felt powerless and desperate. With demon god Lin here, how could they have the chance to enter the Tower of Extinction? This was equivalent to blocking their path to the upper 9 realms. Perhaps we could try to muddle through. I don't believe that demon god Lin can wait for us at the city gate every day. Someone suggested. There's another choice, and that is to directly become a king. A peerless powerhouse said in a low voice. The king, he mentioned, was naturally not to become a peerless king. If they made such a decision, it was equivalent to completely giving up the chance to become a peerless king on the path of cultivation. This price was undoubtedly too heavy. This damned demon god Lin. At this moment, the powerhouses of the major orthodoxies outside the city, whether they were king or others, hated Lin Sun even more, because this bloodbath was too great of a blow to them. Chapter 1176. The Tower of Apex and the Tower of Apex were separated by a street. In the middle of the street, there was an ancient palace that was hundreds of meters high. Looking from the palace, the Tower of Apex was on the east side, and the Tower of Apex was on the west side. This was originally the territory of the moon-worshipping cult, but now was occupied by Lin Sun. While the city was still in turmoil, Lin Sun and Little Silver had already gathered in this palace. Little Silver, have a look and see if there are any treasures you need, said Lin Sun. In front of him, treasures were piled up like a mountain. Spiritual materials, elixirs, magic treasures, jade slips, there were countless treasures of all kinds. Treasure light flowed and filled the room. These were the spoils of war that Lin Sun had obtained after massacring all the major forces. There were more than 30 stalks of king-level herbs. In addition, there were some rare magical materials and treasures, which were almost impossible to find in the outside world. A superb collection of treasures was piled up here, and their value was immeasurable. Not to mention the cultivators in the city. Even the sages would feel dizzy and envious at the sight of it. It showed how many treasures these major forces had plundered after they took control of the ancient city of immortal incineration. It was no wonder that all the orthodoxies in the world would send their forces to the domain of Apex at all costs when it came. There were so many opportunities here that the outside world could not compare with. However, these treasures now belonged to Lin's son. If the big forces like Golden Crow and Beast Spirit Mountain knew about this, they would probably go crazy with anger. Not to mention that their territory was wiped out. Even the treasures that they had painstakingly collected were lost. This was a heavy blow. Hearing Lin's son's words, Little Silver didn't stand on ceremony. Soon, he collected more than 10 kinds of treasures, all of which could help him evolve. That's it. Lin's son was stunned. He was a little surprised that Little Silver only picked so few treasures out of so many. If only I had tranquilizer flower. Little Silver was also a little depressed. He was on the path of soul evolution, but there were too few treasures related to soul evolution in this world. Lin's son nodded. Leave it to me. He planned to take out some of the treasures that were useless to him and exchange them with other cultivators for treasures that were related to the cultivation of the soul. Master, you don't have to be like this. It's my mission to fight to the death for you. I'm not thinking about your kindness. Little Silver looked up with a solemn expression. I know. Lin's son smiled. But it was precisely because of this that Lin's son was even more determined to help Little Silver. Next, Lin's son screamed, counted, and sorted out the treasures in the hall one by one. He kept the ones he needed and planned to exchange the rest. Little Silver had returned to Lin's son's sea of consciousness and began to cultivate. After entering the domain of Absolute Summit this time, Little Silver also planned to attack the King Realm. Perhaps they all thought that the bloodbath was over. Lin's son muttered to himself. With cold light surging in his black eyes, he turned around and left the hall. In a courtyard, several warriors of the Golden Crow clan were gathered. All of them had escaped disaster amidst the chaos, surviving. At this moment, they were gathered together. I've received the message from Senior Brother Wu Yuanjin. He ordered us to leave the immortal world. Only in this way can we change the situation. A young man said with a gloomy face. His name was Wu Huadian, an extremely powerful figure. Leave? Aren't we going to take revenge? A woman said angrily. The young man said coldly. The kings can't enter the city. Who do you think could defeat Demon Godland? We're lucky to survive. Then let's do that. This time, in addition to the 7th prince, the 9th prince, and the 13th prince also entered the domain of Absolute Summit. However, unlike us, the 9th prince and the 13th prince entered the zone of absolute apex from another welcoming place. What we need to do is to meet them as soon as possible and tell them what happened in the immortal incineration ancient city. Then, it's time to think about revenge. The other one took a deep breath and said firmly. Then, they got up carefully and left the courtyard. The ancient city of immortal burning was in an uproar. People were talking about Lin Sun's bloodbath in the streets and alleys. Haha, that Golden Crow lineage really doesn't learn their lesson. They were robbed by demon god Lin a while ago, yet they still dare to participate in the operation against demon god Lin. Aren't they courting death? Look, these Golden Crows are either fleeing or killing. They used to be so arrogant, but now they don't even dare to enter the city. Discussions about the Golden Crows could be heard from time to time on the street. Wu Huadian and the others had concealed their aura for fear of being recognized. However, they gritted their teeth when they heard the discussions. In the past, who dared to talk about them so openly in the immortal world? But now, a random nobody dared to comment on them, and their words were full of schadenfreude. It was too infuriating. Let's endure it for now. We'll make a comeback sooner or later. Wu Huadian took a deep breath and said in a low voice. Soon, they arrived in front of the tower of Absolute Summit. The tower was towering, perfectly round, and occupied a vast area. One only needed to offer a king herb to enter the tower to be transported to another world. It was extremely magical. Moreover, it was different from the ordinary transmission formation. One only needed to know the name of a world to be transported to it. When Wu Huadian and the others arrived, they were shocked to find that the Tower of Absolute Summit, which used to be extremely lively, was now extremely deserted. Only a few figures were scattered around. How could this be? Wu Huadian narrowed his eyes, vaguely feeling that something was wrong. The situation is not good. Let's leave here first. He transmitted his voice in a low voice. He made a prompt decision to retreat. But at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the gate of the Tower of Absolute Summit, as if he had been waiting there for a long time. This person was naturally Lin's son. However, he had concealed his aura and traces when he used Bai Qi. Oh no! The expressions of Wu Huadian and the others changed abruptly. Who would have thought that Demon God Lin would not give up after carrying out the bloodbath? He was waiting here for his prey. Was he really going to kill all of them? It's the 16th batch. It seems that there are quite a lot of surviving members of great forces. Lin Sun spoke in a calm voice, but the meaning in his words made Wu Huadian and the others shudder. Obviously, there were 15 batches of descendants of great forces like them who wanted to use the Tower of Absolute Summit to leave, but they were all blocked here by Demon God Lin. Run! Almost without any hesitation, Wu Huadian and the others chose to escape. Unfortunately, it was destined to be in vain. Lin Sun was determined to eliminate all the enemies at the city gate. How could he let them leave? Boom! Divine splendor rose as the battle broke out. There was no suspense at all. Wu Huadian and the others were all killed. None of them survived. After doing all this, Lin Sun waved his sleeve and erased the traces of the battle. Then, he covered his body with Bai Qi again and waited there for his prey. The hearts of the other cultivators trembled when they saw this. No one dared to approach. Moreover, they had all been warned by Lin Sun that whoever dared to warn those enemies would bear the consequences. This was also the reason why the vicinity of the Tower of Absolute Summit was deserted when Wu Huadian and the others arrived. With Demon God Lin's deterrence, who dared to disrupt his plan of waiting for his prey? For 3 whole days, Lin Sun had been waiting there the whole time. Dozens of groups of experts from various forces had appeared, and then they were killed in batches. This was shocking and made one's hair stand on end. They realized that this time, Demon God Lin really wanted to wipe out all the remaining forces of the enemy forces in the city. Unfortunately, the news was still leaked. On the 3rd day, Lin Sun waited for a long time, but there was no trace of the enemy again. However, this was also within Lin Sun's expectation. Next, he issued 2 bounties in the city. The first bounty was that anyone who could provide clues about the enemy would be rewarded with a king herb, as long as the clues were reliable. When this bounty was spread, the entire ancient city of burning immortals was in an uproar, and the remaining enemies who were originally hiding in the city felt chills all over. They didn't dare to stay any longer and fled the city one after another. Demon God Lin is really ruthless. Just the bounty of a king herb is enough to mobilize most of the cultivators in the city to run errands for him. Many people sighed with emotion. In this way, which descendant of the great forces would dare to stay? The second bounty was to purchase treasures related to the cultivation of the spirit. Lin Sun was willing to purchase them at a high price. The more the better. This tempted many cultivators in the city. Now, everyone knew that Lin Sun had obtained an immeasurable amount of wealth after massacring all the major forces. He was extremely rich. If they could exchange with him, they would definitely be able to exchange for many treasures that couldn't be bought in the market. For a time, the front of the hall where Lin Sun resided could be said to be crowded. Every day, many cultivators came to trade with Lin Sun with the treasures in their hands. Every cultivator was very satisfied when they left because the price offered by Lin Sun was really good. In this way, Lin Sun gained a good reputation. Some cultivators who were originally hesitant and worried that Lin Sun would lower the price during the trade stopped hesitating and took out their treasures. On the other hand, those major forces outside the city that had enmity with Lin Sun were on the verge of spitting blood with rage. Not only did Lin Sun issue a bounty for the descendants of their forces, he even used their wealth to trade with all the cultivators in the city. He simply deserved to be cut into pieces. This storm continued in a mortal incineration for over half a month before it calmed down and returned calm. All the cultivators clearly sensed that a mortal incineration had changed, and it was completely different from before. With demon god Lin's presence, even those major forces that had no enmity with demon god Lin restrained their arrogance and sharpness, and they kept a very low profile. This was undoubtedly a fortunate thing to the other cultivators, and it allowed them to avoid suffering too much pressure. However, the only problem that was slightly troublesome was that the entrance to the city had always been firmly controlled by a group of kings, and every single time they entered or left the city, it was terrifying. Many cultivators even started to look forward to Lin Sun's advancement into the king realm as soon as possible, and then he would carry out another round of massacring those kings outside the city. Chapter 1177. While the outside world was bustling, Lin Sun's life had returned to calm. Besides meditating and cultivating every day, he would figure out his own cultivation method and deduce his own Tao. Occasionally, he would make time to trade with the cultivators that came to visit him. Time passed by, and the atmosphere in immortal incineration gradually recovered. It was bustling, prosperous, and orderly. However, no matter who it was, as long as they passed by Lin's residence, they would slow down and look more or less in awe and respect. Perhaps Lin Sun hadn't stepped foot into the peak of the king realm, but at least no one in immortal incineration dared to offend him now. This was the power he gained from slaughtering. On this day, Lin Sun opened his eyes for meditation, and then he tapped lightly in the air with the tip of his finger, causing a huge abyss to emerge with a strange rumble. The abyss was obscure, and there were traces of stars being obliterated in its surroundings. It was unfathomable. After that, the Tao of water and Tao of fire emerged like the yin and yang of Tai Chi. They chased each other and formed a wonderful balance as the abyss revolved. Boundless dragon roars resounded from the depths of the abyss, and it seemed as if a true dragon was lying dormant within it. The abyss was buzzing, the water and fire were chasing each other, and the dragon roars were surging. They grew and multiplied endlessly, and it revealed a horrifying scene in the void. This was the path that Lin Sun sought after countless deductions and deductions with great efforts. It was based on the Tao of star obliteration and sky devouring. It was guided by the Tao of water and fire. It was guided by the Tao of true dragon. It was guided by the Tao of immortality. The four types of Tao had merged into one, but Lin Sun's ambition and pursuit on his path was absolutely not simple. However, this path was still in its embryonic form, but it already revealed an imposing manner that could accommodate all Taos and devour all things in the world. Its Tao is boundless, infinite, and without rules, so it can accommodate what the world can't and devour what the world can't. Lin Sun muttered, and he became even firmer in his pursuit of the Tao. Now, he only lacked an opportunity to reach the peak of the king realm, and he didn't lack anything else. I wonder when the old toad will be able to walk out of the blessed place left behind by immortal incineration. And Alu, that fellow has been gone for a few months. Has he found the clues about the ancient land of Myriad? Somehow, Lin Sun thought of Old Toad and Alu. After that, he shook his head. Both of them had their own paths towards the Tao to seek, so worrying was useless because even he couldn't help them. The pursuit of the great Tao had always depended on oneself. Lin Sun didn't think anymore. He stood up and left the palace. He decided to go to the house of Absolute Summit. The streets were bustling with activity, flourishing even more than in the past. Great news! An ancient freak named Qi Ling Xiao has come out of seclusion and triggered the Extinction Immortal King Tribulation. He then overcame the tribulation to become a king, a prodigy who was the first to step into the Extinction King stage. A piece of big news spread and shocked the entire city. When Lin Sun walked out, he immediately knew. Qi Lingxiao. He had heard that this person was extremely powerful and terrifying. He had been hidden for countless years, and when he appeared in this world, he revealed world-shocking combat strength. This was especially the case with the Six Hells world extermination scripture that this person grasped. It was known to be a top-notch absolute inheritance since ancient times and was boundlessly terrifying. He's actually the first person to step into the Extinction King realm. Lin Sun's heart was slightly restless. During the primeval times, the Absolute Summit region had descended numerous times, but no one had stepped foot into this realm. So, the Extinction King realm was taken to be a legend that was ethereal and untouchable. Now, Qi Lingxiao's rise had undoubtedly made the legend become reality. It wasn't exaggerated to call him the first Extinction King since ancient times until now. The white cloud dimension that Qi Lingxiao resides in has become the center of attention of the 3,000 worlds. As for Qi Lingxiao, he has also aroused the fear of many other ancient freaks. There's an even more exaggerated rumor that Qi Lingxiao killed over 10 king realm experts on the first day he became a king, and it was as easy as harvesting grass. My God, is the Extinction King realm so terrifying? The sounds of discussion resounded everywhere. The topic of Qi Lingxiao and the Extinction King realm had become the hottest topic in Immortal Incineration City. Because Qi Lingxiao was the first known existence to attain the Extinction King realm. But if one thought about it carefully, an incident that occurred in the White Cloud dimension could spread throughout the 3,000 worlds and cause countless cultivators to be stirred. It was conceivable how much attention Qi Lingxiao, who had attained the Extinction King realm, received. Lin Sun had a strong premonition in his heart. In the following days, there were bound to be more and more existences like Qi Lingxiao who would break through and attain the Extinction King realm. The real competition is finally about to begin. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep as he thought of many things. If the 3,000 worlds were said to be a place of fortune for any cultivator below the King realm, then the upper 9 realms were destined to be the trial ground for the Extinction King realm. Lin Sun came to the Tower of Absolute Summit amidst the discussion. To Lin Sun's surprise, the gate of the Tower of Absolute Summit was blocked by a group of people, and they didn't allow other cultivators to approach. Want to enter the tower? That's fine. You'll be qualified to enter as long as you can defeat any one of us. Otherwise, you'll have to leave with your tail between your legs. A man in a purple robe stood in front of the gate and spoke indifferently. He was tall and slender, and his whole body was suffused with a pale purple brilliance. His arms were crossed in front of his chest, and his expression was cold and arrogant. These guys who came from other realms are too much. Nearby, some cultivators looked gloomy. Lin Sun stood in the crowd, and through the discussion, he soon understood everything. It turned out that in recent days, there were many cultivators who didn't belong to the immortal burning realm who came from other realms through the Tower of Absolute Summit. Among them, there were some extremely powerful figures who tried to enter the upper 9 realms through the Tower of Absolute Summit. If so, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, this was a very normal competition. There was a Tower of Absolute Summit in each of the 3,000 worlds, and there was no rule that required the cultivators of each world to enter the upper 9 realms through the Tower of Absolute Summit. But the current situation was that these foreign cultivators tried to control the Tower of Absolute Summit and didn't allow other cultivators to approach, so as to fight for more places to enter the upper 9 realms for the descendants of their forces. This was too overbearing. The Tower of Absolute Summit didn't belong to any force. Every cultivator could enter it to fight for the opportunity to enter the upper 9 realms. Once it was blocked, it was tantamount to completely killing some cultivator's chance to enter the upper 9 realms. Alas, who could be blamed for this? The domain of Absolute Summit has always been based on strength. As long as your fist is big enough, what can't you do? Someone muttered angrily. Lin Sun couldn't help but ask, will the other forces in the city just watch all this happen? That person said disdainfully, they're just jackals of the same lair. If the descendants of those forces in the city want to enter the Tower of Absolute Summit, they naturally won't be stopped. These foreign forces only dare to bully us cultivators who don't belong to any sect. Lin Sun suddenly understood and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This was the foundation of the big forces. Compared with them, it was too difficult for the cultivators at the bottom to rise. Just like this Tower of Absolute Summit. Obviously anyone could enter, but now it was controlled by the big forces, which was equivalent to monopolizing the opportunity to enter the upper 9 realms. Even if there were many amazing geniuses among those cultivators at the bottom, how could they compete with those big forces? There were only 1,000 places to enter the upper 9 realms in each world. Once the limited places were controlled by the big forces, it could be said that the cultivators who didn't belong to any sect or small forces were doomed to have no chance to enter the upper 9 realms. The group of cultivators that controlled the Tower of Absolute Summit before him were from a big force called the Ancient Netherworld Taoist sect. In the outside world, it was an ancient sect that had stood towering in the Big Dipper world for countless years, and it possessed extremely deep resources and reserves. The violet-clothed man in the lead was called Luo Chuan, and he was a top genius. They dared to control the Tower of Absolute Summit without the slightest fear and were unafraid of the threats of the other great forces in the city. So it was obvious that they had something to rely on. Otherwise, if it was anyone else, that person would probably be annihilated by the big forces in the city. After all, there were only so many places, so who would watch helplessly as it was divided up by others? I've come to seek guidance. A young man with slender limbs and a vigorous aura stood out from the battlefield, and he challenged an expert from the Ancient Netherworld Taoist sect. Luo Chuan crossed his arms before his chest, and the corners of his mouth twitched before a wisp of a playful arc appeared on his face as he said, "Junior Brother Feng, since this friend has challenged you, then go play with him." The man called Junior Brother Feng had a thin figure, a pale countenance, and seemed extremely weak. His face sank when he heard this, and his gaze was hostile as he stared at the vigorous man that challenged him and said, "There are so many people here, yet you only chose me as your opponent. Do you think I'm the weakest?" His voice was ghastly and terrifying. The vigorous man said, "If you're unwilling to accept the challenge, then you can change it to someone else." Junior Brother Feng smiled mischievously and said, "Very good. I like tough bones like you." Bang! As he spoke, he'd already attacked. He seemed to be weak, yet when he attacked, he was like a violent bolt of lightning, and his entire body emitted surging, killing intent that covered the heavens and the earth. Shit! The vigorous man's expression changed slightly as he realized that the opponent he'd chosen wasn't as simple as he seemed on the surface, and the opponent was an extremely terrifying and ruthless figure. However, it was too late for regret now. Without the slightest hesitation, he went all out. Both of them were locked in a fierce battle. But in next to no time, the vigorous man was suppressed, and the bones in his body ceaselessly emitted the sound of shattering while fresh blood sprayed. Junior Brother Feng's methods were extremely cruel. In the end, he actually shattered all the bones in the vigorous man's body, causing him to fall weakly to the ground like a pile of mush. This made everyone's heart turn cold. Junior Brother Feng said with a smile, "Your hard bones have been shattered. Do you have anything to say now?" On the ground, the vigorous man's face was ashen, and he was in pain and despair. Bang! Junior Brother Feng stepped down and crushed his head, causing him to die completely, and scarlet blood splashed out. The onlookers were all stiff, and their expressions changed. It was just a challenge, but the vigorous man was killed in a cruel way, which made many people feel very uncomfortable. Luo Chuan and the other successors of the ancient Netherworld Taoism sect all smiled and disapproved of this. Those who dare to challenge them should be aware of death. Lin Sun, on the other hand, frowned. Chapter 1178. On the ground, the strong man died tragically. His bones were smashed, and his head was crushed. This bloody scene shocked everyone present. "It's the 37th," someone sighed. This number made Lin Sun frown again. Without saying much, he stepped forward and walked out of the crowd. Junior Brother Fong was just about to return when he saw another person stand out, and he instantly raised his brows while a wisp of a cold and fierce expression appeared on his pale face. Oh, another tough bone has come out? In front of the gate of the Tower of the Apex, Luo Chuan and other successors of ancient underworld Taoism sect were also slightly stunned. They seemed to be very surprised that someone dared to stand out and court death at this time. Was the threat, just now, not enough? Junior Brother Fong, it seems that many people think you're easy to bully. A blue-robed woman smiled with a trace of ridicule. Junior Brother Fong, why don't you let me have a try? Some people were also eager to have a try. Different from the reactions of the successors of ancient underworld Taoism sect, when they saw Lin Sun's figure, the nearby practitioners were stunned at first, and then their hearts shook fiercely and their faces suddenly changed. Demon Lin, who couldn't recognize Lin Sun's identity among the practitioners in the city. For a time, all the practitioners seemed to have a tacit understanding and kept silent. They didn't intend to remind those outsiders how terrifying the young man in front of them was. They all restrained their excitement and intended to watch the show. Are you also going to challenge me? At this time, Junior Brother Feng's face was cold. Looking at Lin Sun coming over, his eyes flashed with undisguised killing intent. I want to go upstairs. Are you going to stop me? Lin Sun asked. When he spoke, he didn't stop walking. Go upstairs. Hearing this, Luo Chuan and others frowned. Didn't this guy see the situation clearly? This place had been blocked by them, but he acted like this. Did he think they didn't exist? Stop. Seeing Lin Sun move forward without fear, Junior Brother Feng's face darkened, and his eyes surged with killing intent. He felt that his dignity was challenged. Boom! As he spoke, he raised his hand and grabbed Lin Sun's head. This was a vital point. Obviously, Junior Brother Feng didn't intend to stop Lin Sun at all, but wanted to kill him. If Lin Sun died, he would be blocked. However, when they witnessed this scene, the expressions of the nearby spectators grew even more strange. They'd seen people courting death, but they'd never seen someone so impatient to court death. However, there was still no one to warn him. Everyone was so angry that they couldn't wait for Lin Sun to start a killing spree. How could they inform these outsiders? At the same time, Luo Chuan noticed that the atmosphere in the surroundings was slightly off, but an unexpected event occurred before he could react. Bang! Junior Brother Feng suddenly knelt on the ground. His knees exploded and the ground shook. After that, his neck tilted to one side, and his vitality was severed. He was still kneeling on the ground even before death, and fresh blood gurgled out from his legs in a scarlet and dazzling manner. And this was just the power of Lin Sun's casual slap. Although they had long expected that Junior Brother Feng was no match for Fiend Celestial Lin, the spectators still drew a gasp when they saw this scene. Too strong, as expected of demonic God Lin. Just now, Junior Brother Feng's strength was clearly seen by everyone. He was undoubtedly a top figure. But now, he was killed by Fiend Celestial Lin with a single slap. Luo Chuan and the others in front of the pavilion of the Apex were livid and gloomy. They were furious, and at the same time, they felt an indescribable chill. Killing Junior Brother Feng in one strike, this was not something that just anyone could do. Who was this young man? The pavilion of the Apex is a place that anyone can enter, but you want to occupy it. Do you really think the cultivators of the immortal incineration ancient city are easy to bully? Lin Sun said indifferently. His words stirred the hearts of the cultivators present, and their blood surged. All the major forces in the city knew about this matter, but they chose to watch from the sidelines. No one was willing to stand up for the disbanded cultivators. But Fiend Celestial Lin had stepped forward. Who wouldn't be moved by this? People's hearts were made of flesh. Fiend Celestial Lin might be fierce and ruthless, but he had never bullied the weak since he entered the immortal incineration ancient city. Even those who had made deals with him had never suffered a loss in terms of price. It was even to the extent that the atmosphere in the immortal incineration ancient city had changed since he started a massacre and massacred many major forces. Those major forces didn't dare to act unbridledly anymore, and they kept a low profile and restrained themselves. The order in the city had become orderly and peaceful. All of this was witnessed by countless cultivators. How could they not feel grateful to Lin Sun in the depths of their hearts? Now that Fiend Celestial Lin had stepped forward once again to face those outsiders, who wouldn't be excited and excited. Fiend Celestial Lin, perhaps he was hated and feared by those major forces. However, in the opinion of cultivators like them, he was an expert that was worthy of respect and reverence. Friend, which force are you from? Luo Chuan took a deep breath and asked in a low voice. He felt that something was off. I don't belong to any sect, and I'm all alone, Lin Sun said indifferently. Looks like you're very confident in your combat strength. But do you know the consequences of your actions? Someone shouted. Everyone, Junior Brother Feng has been killed. It's not the time to talk. The pretty face of the woman in blue was icy cold, and her eyes were filled with coldness. As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed at Lin Sun. No matter who you are, you must pay the price. Bang! Lin Sun stretched out his hand and pressed it in the air. The body of the woman in blue stiffened, and she was instantly restrained. She knelt on the ground with a thump and let out a shrill scream. Fellow Taoist, wait! Luo Chuan shouted in shock. But it was too late. The woman in blue was still kneeling, but she was already dead. Even at death's door, her pretty face was filled with disbelief. She seemed to have never imagined that the young man in front of her would be so terrifying. In the blink of an eye, another expert was killed. Everyone in the surroundings felt their blood boil, and they couldn't help but cheer with extreme excitement. On the other hand, the expressions of Luo Chuan and the others had become extremely solemn and livid. All of them realized that they'd encountered an extremely difficult and ruthless person. Step back and make way for this fellow Taoist. Luo Chuan took a deep breath and gave the order. This was unexpected, and it caused all the experts of the ancient Netherworld Taoist sect to be stunned and feel puzzled. 2 of their fellow disciples had been killed. How could they just step aside like this? But Luo Chuan's attitude was firm, and he took the lead to step aside. The others stepped aside as well when they saw this, but their expressions were extremely unsightly, and every one of them had a ball of fire in their hearts. The expressions of all the cultivators present here changed. They hadn't expected that Luo Chuan would be so resolute and choose to make a concession. It greatly exceeded their expectations. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was calm, and he walked straight up the stairs while disregarding all of them. However, when he arrived before the entrance of the Apex Pavilion, he stopped and said, I don't want to see all of you here in the future. It was a light sentence, but it was an ultimatum that couldn't be disobeyed. The expressions of Luo Chuan and the others were extremely unsightly. As the successors of the ancient Netherworld Taoist sect, when had they ever suffered such treatment? In the past, they were fearless even if they encountered successors of other great forces. But now, they were threatened by a single person. Moreover, this person had killed 2 of their fellow disciples in front of them and intended to expel them from this place. May I know your name, my friend? Luo Chuan's voice was squeezed out from between his teeth. At this moment, Lin Sun was suddenly stunned. He seemed to realize something, and then he said, Didn't the other forces in the city warn you? This time, it was Luo Chuan and the others turned to be stunned. What did this mean? Seeing their reaction, Lin Sun immediately confirmed his guess in his heart. He said to himself, It seems that not only you, but also I have been used. Oh, this is interesting. Killing with a borrowed knife? If the outsiders are the knives, they can borrow the knives to kill me. If I am the knife, I can borrow the knives to kill these foreign forces. Then you can sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. What a clever plan. However, if you don't give me a satisfactory explanation, I don't mind paying you a visit. After that, he walked into the Apex Pavilion. However, although Lin Sun had disappeared, his words were still floating in the field. Although his voice wasn't loud, anyone with some cultivation could hear it clearly. All of a sudden, the expressions of Luo Chuan and the others changed. Were they used? Find out who that young man was just now. Luo Chuan gnashed his teeth. If everything that had happened today could have been avoided, then it meant that they had definitely been kept in the dark. Someone had deliberately concealed something so that they had inadvertently offended an extremely terrifying enemy. Many of the onlookers came to a realization and were shocked in their hearts. Who in the ancient immortal incineration didn't know demon god Lin? The cultivators of the ancient underworld Taoist sect should have learned about demon god Lin as soon as they arrived at the ancient immortal incineration. At least when they occupied the Apex Pavilion, they should have known who they couldn't offend in the city. But it just so happened that they didn't recognize demon god Lin at all when they saw him. This seemed very strange. But which force on earth had deliberately concealed all this so that this scene had happened? Luo Chuan and the others were very curious. Moreover, they had some guesses in their hearts. It didn't take long for them to find out Lin Sun's identity and everything he had done in the immortal incineration. Suddenly, Luo Chuan and the others were stunned as if they were struck by lightning. Their clothes were drenched in cold sweat, but they didn't notice it at all. Whether it was the robbery of the Golden Crow clan, the battle in the Finchin Valley, or the massacre that happened a while ago, all of them seemed too horrifying and terrifying. At the thought that they had offended such a ruthless person, Luo Chuan and the others felt a chill run down their spine. At that time, if they hadn't restrained their killing intent and taken the initiative to retreat, the consequences, it would be unimaginable. Such important news, but those big forces in the city didn't mention it from beginning to end. Instead, they encouraged us to occupy the Apex Pavilion. They are obviously harboring evil intentions. After a long time, Luo Chuan came to his senses, and his face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. Chapter 1179. A stairway to heaven fell from the sky. No one knew how high it was. The wilderness was vast, and the world was lonely. Lin Sun looked around and found no one but himself. This was the Tower of the Apex. Strictly speaking, it was a strange, secret realm. There was only one stairway to heaven in the secret realm. The Great Way was like the sky, and the stairway to heaven was the crossing. Before coming here, Lin Sun had learned that the test of the Tower of the Apex was very simple, which was to climb up the stairs and see which position of the stairway to heaven they could reach. Only the strong who ranked in the first 1,000 steps could enter the upper 9 realms smoothly when the passage appeared. However, there were more than 1,000 steps in this stairway to heaven. Boom! Lin Sun lifted his foot and set foot on the first step. Suddenly, a force of the Great Way came down, which made him pause slightly. Then, his expression didn't change as he stepped onto it. His steps were steady, as if he was walking on the ground or taking a leisurely walk. Each step emitted different power of the Great Way, and the higher one went, the stronger it was. However, these were not difficult for Lin Sun. He walked calmly and couldn't help but think of the stairway mountain in Green Deer School when he was in the mortal world, which was branded with the traces of different Great Ways. At that time, when he climbed the stairway to heaven, he had an invisible competition with Gu Yunting. At that time, Gu Yunting was extremely dazzling and regarded as the first person of the younger generation in Green Deer School. It didn't take long for him to leave the mortal world and enter the ancient desolation territory to cultivate. But now, with the passage of time, everything was different. There were countless talents in the ancient desolation territory. Gu Yunting didn't vanish from the crowd, but he was obviously much dimmer than when he was in Green Deer School. This was actually a kind of competition for the Great Way. On the road of Tao, some people rose like comets, but they would also dim like comets. It was too difficult to go against the current all the time, because in this world, there was never a lack of competitors and people who were stronger than you. I don't know where Shi Yu, Ning Meng, and Yi Qi are now. What about Lu Qingyan? How far has she reached in the pursuit of the way of music? Lin Sun was in a trance. Thinking of his experiences and old friends in his youth, he felt as if it was a lifetime ago. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared in Lin Sun's eyes, waking him up from his thoughts. Raising his head, he saw that on the other side of the stone steps, there were balls of flames. They were silver, indigo, golden, fiery red, deep blue. Each fireball corresponded to a stone stair. They floated in the air and emitted a different aura and luster. This was Tao fire. As the saying went, the path of the Tao would not end until the flames of the Tao were extinguished. Simply speaking, the Tao flame was the brand of battle left behind by a cultivator on the heaven stairway of the Grand Tao, and it contained the will to fight of an expert. Only the top 1,000 experts were qualified to leave behind their own Tao fire on these 1,000 steps. Of course, once he was defeated, his Tao flame would be erased and taken over by others. Lin Sun's expression became serious. He knew that the real test had come. The first ball of Tao fire was light green and was located on the side of the 1,000th step. Buzz! When Lin Sun climbed this stone step, the scene in front of him suddenly changed, and he appeared in an empty world. At the same time, the light green flame transformed into a woman with a graceful figure. Her aura was icy cold, and her entire body emitted a capable aura. Whoosh! As soon as the woman appeared, she rushed up like a green rainbow, dazzling and blazing. She waved her hand, and thousands of thick green vines emerged out of thin air. They danced wildly between heaven and earth, crisscrossing and covering Lin Sun's figure, turning it into a cage. Whoosh! Then, on each vine, branches grew out crazily, and enchanting flowers rose in the wind, shining with a frightening luster, trying to drown Lin Sun. The truth of the Tao of wood is endless. It's really exquisite. Lin Sun's black eyes were calm, and an invisible power was running around him. Boom! The bewitching flowers were all crushed into powder, the tender branches exploded, and the vines that were as thick as pythons were broken and shattered inch by inch. Then, the whole cage disappeared with a bang. At this moment, the woman had already rushed over. However, when she was about to attack again, Lin Sun's aura swept over her, and she exploded with a bang. Whoosh! The next moment, Lin Sun returned to the heaven stairway. But the light green Tao fire on the side of the stone step where he stood had disappeared. Lin Sun didn't hesitate and stepped on the 999th stone step. This was a ball of silver Tao fire, and it evolved into an extremely valiant and powerful cultivator of the ancient mysterious Light Clan. But for Lin Sun, it was still not enough. In an instant, the winner was decided. However, his Tao fire didn't extinguish. Instead, it moved backward and appeared on the side of the 1,000th stone step. Then, Lin Sun continued to go up. The 998th step, the 997th step. In just 15 minutes, Lin Sun had stepped on the 500th step. If this scene was seen by the cultivators outside, they would be scared to death. There were millions of cultivators in the immortal burning world. Although most of them didn't set foot on the peerless path, there was no shortage of top cultivators. It could be imagined how cruel the competition was to be ranked in the top 1,000 of the peerless path. Almost all of them were top cultivators of the same generation. Moreover, the higher the stone step, the stronger the combat force was. There was no lack of top cultivators who were more powerful than the previous one, and each ball of Tao fire represented a cultivator who was ranked in the top 1,000. In 15 minutes, Lin Sun defeated the Tao fire of 500 strong cultivators in a row. Such an achievement could be imagined. Not bad, not bad. Although the opponents aren't very strong, they let me see many different paths. This is a rare opportunity. Lin Sun was calm and composed. Even if he fought 500 battles without rest, it didn't cause him much consumption, and he didn't need to stop to recover. He continued to move forward. As time went by, he walked up step by step, and the balls of Tao fire moved down beside him. Soon, Lin Sun saw a figure. It was a dark-skinned young man with a dignified and majestic aura. He was sweating profusely and weak all over. Obviously, he was challenging the Tao Heaven Ladder like Lin Sun. However, he had obviously been here for a long time, and his face was full of exhaustion. When he saw Lin Sun, the young man couldn't help being stunned and said, "My friend, when did you come here?" "About 15 minutes ago," Lin Sun said casually. Unexpectedly, hearing his answer, the young man seemed to be in disbelief and said involuntarily, You reached the 327th stone step in 15 minutes? He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Lin Sun nodded and went up the stone step. The young man didn't believe it at first and thought Lin Sun was bragging. But soon, he noticed that Lin Sun finished a battle and climbed a stone step in just a few breaths. Then, at this speed, Lin Sun continued to climb the stone steps and soon came to the young man. This time, the young man completely believed that the guy in front of him was clearly a monster that couldn't be estimated by common sense. "May I ask your name, my friend?" Seeing that Lin Sun had surpassed him and was about to go up, the young man couldn't help asking. "Lin Sun." Lin Sun answered without looking up. The young man said, "Oh," and then suddenly said involuntarily, "What? It's you." In the ancient city of immortals, there was only one person named Lin Sun, and he had a more famous nickname, Demon Lin. How could the young man not hear of him? No wonder he is so abnormal. It turns out to be this guy. The young man was a little unconvinced at first, but now he was completely convinced. Compared with Demon Lin, he was totally looking for trouble. After 30 minutes, Lin Sun had come to the 100th step. His speed was so fast that it completely broke the record of any practitioner in the past. It could be described as an irresistible force, like a hot knife through butter. On the way, Lin Sun also met some practitioners who left a sound of shock all the way. Lin Sun's speed was too fast. It was a completely one-sided suppression. On the other hand, had any of the cultivators all along the way seen such a ferocious fellow? However, when he arrived at the 100th step, Lin Sun began to feel the pressure. And he was keenly aware that from here on, all the opponents he met should be strong practitioners who had reached the peak of Tao. However, this was still not a problem for Lin Sun. He didn't even bother to rest and reorganize himself before he stepped forward. What made Lin Sun happy was that from here on, every time he defeated an opponent, he saw a different kind of peerless Tao. Some people entered the Tao with sword and reached the extreme level. They were decisive in killing and had shocking sword intent. Some people deduced a certain kind of power of the Tao to the extreme and deduced all kinds of powerful and frightening phenomena once they were exerted. Some people took the road of soul cultivation and mastered the rare method of soul attack in the world, which was the most difficult to defend against. Even some practitioners like Alu, whose physical strength had been tempered to the extreme level, were extremely powerful as if they were indestructible. Fighting with these top figures greatly broadened Lin Sun's horizons, and he also benefited a lot from comparing his own Tao and Dharma through the duels. In this way, Lin Sun unconsciously arrived at the 66th step. However, just as he was about to step up, the Tao flames in front of him all moved down a position. Suddenly, the Tao fire on the 65th step replaced the Tao fire on the 66th step that he had defeated. There was actually someone challenging the first 100 levels. Lin Sun suddenly raised his head and caught a glimpse of a figure in front of more than 10 steps higher. Unfortunately, before he could get a clear look, the Tao flame above him moved backward, causing him to start another battle before he could climb the next stone step. He disappeared from where he stood. At the same time, on the stone step ahead, a figure also made a sound of surprise. He noticed the movement behind him and turned his head. Chapter 1180. That person had bright eyes and white teeth. She was pure and beautiful, and she looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She stood on the stone steps. She blinked her big watery eyes and said to herself, "Why do I feel a little familiar?" Then she patted her forehead as if she suddenly realized something. It's that little brother. She stopped moving forward and squatted on the stone steps, holding her small face in her hands, waiting quietly. Before long, Lin Sun's figure appeared. There was a touch of surprise in her eyes, as if she didn't expect Lin Sun to defeat his opponent so quickly. Then she waved her hand with a smile. "Little brother, we meet again." At the same time, Lin Sun was also stunned. "Chi Yao?" The girl had a sweet smile on her face. Her long, soft, fiery red hair was coiled into a bun with a tree branch. Her delicate and slender body was wrapped in a huge, fiery red leaf, revealing her tender, sparkling calves and snow-white bare feet. Around her snow-white ankles, there was a strange black chain shackling them. There was a strange fire tattoo between her eyebrows. It was Chi Yao, the girl taking medicine mentioned by Old Toad. This woman was not simple at all. For countless years, she had been silent in the Red Cloud Holy Tree. When she came out, she faced the thunder test and broke the shackles. It's Chi Yao. Lin Sun calmed down. This woman was an extremely unfathomable ancient freak. She looked pure and bright, but in fact, she was full of eccentricities. Little brother, you must be Demon God Lin, right? Otherwise, I really can't think of anyone else in the burning celestial realm who could easily make it to the first 100 steps like you, Demon God Lin said with a smile. Chi Yao smiled and exhaled a fragrant breath. Her eyes were clear and charming, and her voice was clear and melodious. Lin Sun nodded. There was no need to hide it. Chi Yao got up and stretched her slim waist. Then she said crisply, Little brother, in fact, when we first met, I wanted to talk to you alone, but it's not too late now. Lin Sun was surprised. Talk about what? Chi Yao said with a smile. To talk about a deal. If I'm right, you should have a piece of Bodhi wood that has been bombarded by the power of cutting Tao, right? Lin Sun was stunned. He looked calm, but in fact, he was a little shocked. He did have a piece of blackened and withered Bodhi wood in his hand, which he obtained from the dilapidated temple left by the holy monk Duji. There was also a strange golden power sealed inside the Bodhi tree. It was extremely mysterious and strange, most likely the power of the Tao severing art. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that Chi Yao would know that he had it. Little big brother, don't overthink it. The reason why I can sense the Bodhi tree is because of my innate bloodline ability. Chi Yao's eyes flashed with a strange light as she giggled. But Lin Sun still couldn't calm down. Where did Chi Yao come from? How could she have such a strange and amazing talent? So, you've been eyeing me since we first met? Asked Lin Sun. Chi Yao blinked her large and charming eyes and nodded. Yes, the Bodhi tree is very useful to me. If possible, I must obtain it. Her voice was crisp and clear, and her tone was relaxed. However, it carried a trace of determination. After that, she smiled and pointed at the strange black chain around her ankle. She said, If little brother is willing to give up the Bodhi wood, then I'm willing to exchange this treasure with you. Lin Sun was shocked again. He didn't forget that Old Toad once said that this chain was an extremely terrible holy treasure with an extraordinary origin. This was indeed the case. The chain was only as thick as a little finger, black and translucent. It was wrapped around a pair of snow-white ankles and was suffused with a trace of heart-palpitating death chi. This death chi was so strange that it turned into strange and twisted Taoist patterns, densely imprinted on every part of the chain. No matter who saw it, they would be attracted and then shocked. However, what really made Lin Sun unable to calm down was that in order to get the Bodhi wood, Chi Yao wanted to exchange such a strange and terrible holy treasure, which surprised Lin Sun a little. Is it more valuable than a holy treasure? Asked Lin Sun. Chi Yao smiled sweetly. Her teeth were sparkling and her pink lips were moist. She said, For me, it's more attractive than a holy treasure, so I'm willing to exchange it with a holy treasure. But in the eyes of others, I'm afraid it's no different from a piece of rotten wood. Lin Sun also smiled. You're right. I have the same idea as you. I've never intended to sell this piece of rotten wood to anyone. Chi Yao was stunned and couldn't help asking, Little brother, won't you think about it again? As she spoke, she bit her cherry lips and showed a touch of shyness. Her clear eyes were flowing, exuding an amazing charm. Her voice also became soft and coquettish. If little brother is willing to part with it, maybe it's okay for me to devote myself to you. She was pure and beautiful. At this moment, when she opened her mouth shyly, she suddenly revealed endless charm. Anyone who saw her would be fascinated by her. But Lin Sun's eyes were clear and calm. He said seriously, How can we be greedy for beauty when we cultivate Taoism? Girl, please behave yourself. Chi Yao's eyes widened in disbelief. After a while, she blushed and said, Compared with the little brother of three-legged golden toad, you're really a piece of wood. You're not romantic at all. Lin Sun looked solemn and sighed softly. Beauty is like a skeleton, white bones and flesh. You have a skin that can bring disaster to the country and people. But in my eyes, what I see is the white bones and skeletons under the skin. It's really boring. Qiao seemed a little annoyed and said, "Little brother, you're still single, aren't you?" Lin Sun was stunned. Qiao burst into laughter and pointed to Lin Sun. "Sure enough, I'm right. You're such an unromantic guy. I'm afraid you won't realize it, even if there's a girl who likes you." Lin Sun smiled slightly. "It's none of your business." Qiao couldn't help sighing when she saw Lin Sun was so stubborn. "Little brother, your stubbornness makes it difficult for me. If I can't get the Bodhi wood, I won't be able to eat well and sleep well. How can I pursue the Tao in the future?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, "So you're going to rob it?" Qiao thought for a while and then waved her hand in annoyance. "Let's not think about it now." Lin Sun said seriously at this time, "Girl, if possible, I don't want to be your enemy. Please think twice." After that, he ignored Qiao and stepped on the steps to continue his challenge. Whoosh! His figure disappeared, and he began to fight with the next opponent. At this time, the smile on Qiao's face disappeared little by little, turning into a kind of extreme calmness and coldness. The breath exuded from her body also became as cold as snow, not as bright as before, especially those eyes that were bright like stars, and they faintly surged with an extremely terrifying, flaming divine glow. "I can't see through him. I really can't see through him. If I could see through him, I would have taken action long ago," she murmured in her heart. After a while, she took a deep breath, converged the cold breath around her body, and restored her former bright and pure look. At this time, Lin Sun had passed the 65th stone step and appeared. "Little brother, if you can reach the top, I promise I will seriously consider your suggestion." Qiao revealed a sweet and brilliant smile and said in a crisp voice. Lin Sun shrugged and said, "Whether you can reach the top or not has nothing to do with the advice I give you. If you insist on doing something, I'm afraid no one can stop you. However, I might as well be frank. Those who are my enemies are destined to not have a good end, whether it is now or in the future." Qiao's clear eyes narrowed into an arc like the edge of a blade, and then she smiled silently, as if she didn't care. Lin Sun didn't say anything else and continued to challenge the level. At this point, the two of them didn't talk anymore, and the atmosphere seemed very gloomy. Qiao sat there again and didn't challenge the level anymore. She held her chin with her white, jade-like hands and watched quietly. Her eyes blinked from time to time as if she wanted to figure out what kind of person Lin Sun was in front of her. 64th, 63rd. Every time she saw Lin Sun take a step, the scene of her breakthrough appeared in Qiao's mind, and she compared it. In the end, this comparison fell on how much time it took to break through the level. Then, a strange light flashed in Qiao's clear eyes occasionally, because until now, Lin Sun's speed was a little faster than hers every time. However, she didn't care too much because if she wanted to, she could do it too. Soon, Lin Sun came to the 50th step. Sitting on the 49th step, Qiao suddenly said, "The Great Way is 50, and the Heavenly Evolution is 49. Little brother, do you know what it means?" Her voice was clear and melodious. But Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly narrowed, and then he said, "Escape one." Qiao pursed her moist lips and smiled without saying a word. Lin Sun also smiled and lifted his foot lightly on the 49th step with a natural look. Qiao was slightly stunned, and then her delicate body tightened imperceptibly. She immediately recovered her composure, but her eyes were cold as she looked at Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to her. Of course, he knew the meaning of Qiao's words. It was nothing more than reminding him not to be too ruthless in everything and to leave a chance for him to turn back. Unfortunately, this piece of Bodhi wood could never be handed over because it was related to the secret of the death of Holy Monk Du Ji and Black Phoenix Holy Queen. There was a big mystery like a taboo. Lin Sun would never give it up. If Qiao didn't hesitate to be his enemy and insisted on taking this thing, Lin Sun didn't mind killing one more enemy. It seems that I can't persuade her anymore. Looking at Lin Sun's figure step by step, Chiao rubbed her eyebrows in distress and sighed in her heart. If it was an ordinary Bodhi wood, Chiao wouldn't care about it at all. But the piece of Bodhi wood in Lin Sun's hand was different. It had withstood the bombardment of Tao cutting. Its value was so great that Chiao would fight for it at all costs. Because this was a rare taboo item since ancient times. It should have been erased from the world, but for some reason, it was preserved. If she could have a chance to understand the taboo mystery. Chapter 1181. The 36th. The 35th. As he walked up the stairs, Lin Sun's speed slowed down significantly, because the opponents he encountered were constantly getting stronger. Every one of them could be called a peerless genius in the outside world, and they could dominate the peerless path. It was easy for Lin Sun to defeat them, but it was very difficult for him to go up step by step and defeat his opponents one by one without stopping. Since climbing the stairway to heaven, Lin Sun had never stopped to recover his strength. He was relying entirely on his qi to climb up. I have almost 1/3 of my strength left. It should be enough to fight to the extreme. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and his black eyes were full of determination. Then, he continued to walk. The 27th. The 26th. Chiao stood barefoot on the stone steps, and her clear eyes were like water as she stared at the figure walking alone on the stone steps. Her fiery hair fluttered, and her skin was whiter than snow. Her expression was cold and quiet, and there was a hint of solemnity in her bright eyes. Until now, Lin Sun hadn't stopped to rest, and his breath was long and steady, without a trace of embarrassment. Others might not know, but Chiao knew very well that there might be peerless figures who could achieve this, but there were absolutely only a handful of them. And in the entire burning celestial realm, there was probably no one who could be Lin Sun's opponent. As for those fellows who advanced to the king realm, thinking of this, Chiao's lips curled into a disdainful smile. If they didn't reach the king realm, they would only be a bunch of trash in the future. She had reason to be conceited because if she wanted to become a king realm, she could have easily entered this realm as early as the ancient times. But she didn't. Instead, she would rather not hide for endless years, endure endless loneliness and the torture of danger, and wait until today to awaken, all for the sake of reaching the king realm. In such a comparison, Chiao naturally wouldn't put any so-called king realm in her eyes. It could be said that in the competition for hegemony in the domain of extinction, those who had already become king realm but hadn't set foot on the peak could already be called losers. As time went by, Lin Sun's speed became slower and slower, but his pace was still steady. That lonely and handsome figure seemed like an unshakable mountain that had never been shaken. Chiao felt a wave of heaviness in her heart for no rhyme or reason, and her clear eyes were filled with a heavy expression. Even she herself hadn't noticed that her fair and jade-like hands had suddenly and silently clenched tightly. Strands of strange divine flames floated up into appearance on her snow-white skin, and it caused her to seem like a fully drawn bow. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I'm afraid that no one would be able to imagine that there would be such a heaven-defying character in this generation, Chiao muttered to herself. If she wasn't sure, she would have suspected that Lin Sun was also an ancient freak who had been silent for countless years and had an extremely proud and dazzling past. But obviously, Lin Sun wasn't. This was shocking. Is it really right to become enemies with this kid for a piece of Bodhi wood? When she saw Lin Sun's figure appear on the 10th stone step, Chiao's heart wavered a little, and her original conceit and pride also disappeared. When she talked with Lin before, she never showed any disdain, nor did she regard him as an opponent to be feared and taken seriously. Therefore, she was able to smile and smile as she wished. But now it was different, because Lin Sun had set foot on the 10th stone step of the ladder of heaven. Chiao knew very well how difficult it was for any peerless figure to set foot on this step, and it was almost an impossible miracle to climb step by step like Lin Sun from the beginning to the end without taking a breath. Even Chiao herself felt that it was very difficult, and she had to risk her life to do it. But Lin Sun's pace was still very steady. This was the reason why Qi Yao's heart wavered a little. She also began to seriously think about whether it was right or wrong to be enemies with Lin Sun. In ancient times, this kid's sharpness was enough to amaze the world, and it couldn't be concealed, right? Qi Yao was stunned, and her emotions fluctuated. Lin Sun was a little out of breath, and there was sweat on his forehead. He was already on the 8th stone step. Since the beginning of the 1000th step, he had fought in 992 battles without rest. Every one of his opponents was a top-notch figure among his peers. Moreover, the higher he went, the stronger he was. No matter how strong Lin Sun's foundation was, such continuous battles also consumed a lot of energy, and his physical strength was almost on the verge of exhaustion. Originally, he could have rested and reorganized, but Lin Sun didn't do so. He was seeking the limit of his own cultivation path in the battle. Fight! 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 Although he was exhausted, deep in his heart, the flames of war were burning, and the will to fight was tempered to the extreme. At this moment, there was no need for him to take the initiative at all. The battle saint technique ran on its own, perfectly integrating with his spirit and will. The 6th floor, the 5th floor, the 4th floor. When he reached the 3rd stone step, Lin Sun's physical strength had reached the unprecedented limit that he could bear. There was a buzzing sound in his head, like the roar of horses and spears on the battlefield, and also like the roar of gods and demons. It was so chaotic that it was about to explode. Since he left the Star Chest Sea and began to participate in the great battle of the world, Lin Sun had never been so tired. He wanted to lie down and sleep. Every inch of strength in his body seemed to be drained. This was no longer something that could be supported by willpower. His consciousness began to become muddle-headed and empty. His soul seemed to be out of his body, and he was relying on a kind of instinct to hold on. Finally can't hold on anymore. Qi Yao's eyes lit up when she saw Lin Sun's figure standing still on the 3rd stone step. She inexplicably breathed a sigh of relief. After that, she noticed that she'd been constantly in a tense state since an unknown period of time, and she was worried about personal gains and losses. After thinking for a moment, Qi Yao made a decision and said, "Hey, hurry up and take a rest. I have decided that at least for now, I will not be your enemy." After saying that, she sighed faintly in her heart, realizing that at least in the reincarnation developing realm, she had no intention of competing with Lin Sun. This made her, who had always been conceited and looked down on the people of the world, feel a trace of complex feelings. However, to Qi Yao's surprise, Lin Sun turned a deaf ear to her and seemed to be unaware of it. That lone figure stood towering like a mountain, and it seemed as if no one was able to move him in the slightest. "Little brother, I have already taken a step back. Why do you still have to be angry? As a man, don't you even have this little tolerance?" Qi Yao said in a crisp voice, feeling a little annoyed. She didn't know why Lin Sun was so insistent. Unfortunately, Lin Sun ignored her and stepped on the 2nd step. At this moment, Qi Yao's pupils shrank, and she was finally moved. Could he still fight? The opponent on the 2nd floor was an ancient freak that she had never seen before. Being able to rank 2nd was enough to prove his strength. This battle was extremely hard. Lin Sun was bathed in blood and covered with scars. It was not that he was inferior to his opponent, but that he had consumed too much energy before and was on the verge of exhaustion. At this moment, he was completely relying on a kind of instinct to fight. Bang! In the end, Lin Sun defeated his opponent with a seriously injured body. Then, he turned around as if in a daze, and his eyes became empty. There was only one thought in his mind, which was to seek the extreme of himself and prove the unprecedented path of cultivation. Is this guy crazy? Seeing Lin Sun bathe in blood, Qi Yao was moved again. She had been paying attention, but until now, she found that she could not understand this guy who was regarded as Demon Lin. At this moment, his clothes were stained with blood and his injuries were shocking, but his back still did not bend an inch, revealing a heart-palpitating firmness. Qi Yao could not help but feel a touch of shock in her heart. While Qi Yao's thoughts were flying, Lin Sun had already stepped onto the highest stone step. A figure appeared, like a god of war, strong enough to make any top figure tremble. His whole body was bathed in Taoist light, and his power was peerless. Boom! At this moment, Lin Sun took the initiative to attack, bursting out an unprecedented power. Bang! With one blow, the opponent's figure exploded. Was it over? Lin Sun was stunned and looked up. He was already standing proudly at the top of the ladder of heaven, as if he was outside of Zhou Su. In the boundless sky, balls of Tao flames appeared in the void. They flickered with different lusters and were resplendent like colorful suns. There were a total of 2,990 balls of Taoist fire. Each ball of Taoist fire had invincible momentum. Some were like the scorching sun illuminating the sky. Some were like ice and snow covering the universe. Some were like divine swords suppressing the world. And some were, although the momentum was different, they were all powerful. Plop! Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the ground. Then he couldn't hold on any longer and directly lay down, facing the sky. Endless fatigue, and soreness gushed out from all over his body. His whole body, mind, and were in a kind of numbness. However, his eyes were extremely bright and clear, and a childlike pure smile appeared silently on his blood-stained face. In the sky, there were thousands of Taoist fire, gorgeous and magnificent, illuminating the sky. At this moment, a sound of Taoism resounded in his heart. What is Taoism? It was just 3 words, but it was deafening. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he couldn't help laughing. He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he suddenly sat up from the ground, raised his head slightly, and looked down at the sky. Tao can be said, but it is not a Tao. Natural Tao, Earth Tao, Great Tao, Minor Tao, Sage Tao, Human Tao, All Living Tao. Every word was full of endless heroism, sonorous like a divine sound, stirring Zhou Su. No one knew when Lin Sun had stood up, and his blood-stained clothes were fluttering. His lonely figure seemed to be able to pierce the sky, and he had the momentum to surpass Zhou Su. There's Tao? No Tao. Everyone says that it's nonsense. Speaking of this, Lin Sun's voice suddenly stopped, and an unprecedented disdain and firmness appeared between his eyebrows. I seek my own Tao. Every single word was spoken with a pause, and it was like the spring thunder that shook the world and erupted with a bang. Then, a ray of divine rainbow emerged above Zhou Su. The 2,990 balls of Taoist fire, which were originally suspended in different positions of Zhou Su, trembled violently and swayed constantly. The ray of divine rainbow pierced through the sky, unimpeded all the way. Wherever it passed, all the Taoist fire retreated. Chapter 1182. Purple True World. Purple True Ancient City in a Grand Hall. The descendants of the numinous treasure Holy Land were all beaming with joy. Congratulations, Senior Brother Yin, for reaching the top of the heavenly ladder. From today onwards, the position of the numinous treasure Holy Land in the Purple True World is destined to be unshakable. Congratulatory voices rang out incessantly. Yin Zhanxiu, who was dressed in white, smiled as a sense of pride arose in his heart. Among the millions of experts in the Purple True World, only he, Yin Zhanxiu, had reached the top. The geniuses and ancient freaks of the other orthodoxies were all suppressed by him. This in itself was a source of pride, but among the congratulatory voices, there was one person who was absent-minded. It was Zhao Jingxian. Yin Zhanxiu frowned imperceptibly. Then he walked over and said, "Junior sister Jingxian, is there something on your mind?" Zhao Jingxian replied casually, "Nothing. Are you still worried about Lin Sun?" Yin Zhanxiu asked. Zhao Jingxian was startled, but her clear eyes remained calm as she nodded. "I am indeed a little worried. Almost all the 3,000 worlds were controlled by the various orthodoxies, and there were countless who had advanced to the king realm. Lin Sun was all alone, and his situation was bound to be very difficult. Unless he advanced to the king realm, how could he compete with the other orthodoxies?" Zhao Jingxian understood Lin Sun's temperament very well. and she knew that he would never bow to any orthodoxies or attach himself to any force. But in this way, it was too difficult for him to rise up by himself. Zhao Jingxian was so deep in her thoughts that she didn't notice a flash of coldness between Yin Zhanqiu's brows. Junior sister Jingxian, you should remember your identity. Lin Sun is an enemy of the numinous treasure Holy Land. Yin Zhanqiu reminded her in a low voice. Zhao Jingxian said coldly, but he is also my friend. Her voice carried a hint of persistence. Yin Zhanqiu's expression turned cold, and then he suddenly started laughing and said, let's not talk about all of this. In short, this kid is bound to be hated by everyone in the Apex region, and he'll be targeted by many. Not to mention attaining the Apex King realm. Even survival will probably be extremely difficult for him. A trace of anger flashed through Zhao Jingxuan's clear eyes, and then she said calmly, if it's a competition between peers, I believe that he won't be inferior to anyone. Senior apprentice brother Yin, even if he is your enemy, slandering him like this is damaging to your own demeanor. Yin Zhanqiu's face darkened. Without waiting for him to speak, Zhao Jingxian raised her eyes and looked straight at him. She said word by word, I know that you can't wait to kill him. But to be honest, even if you set foot on the top of the heavenly ladder of the great path in this world, Lin Sun will not fear you at all. Yin Zhanqiu was so enraged that he burst into laughter. Junior sister Jingxian, do you really have to bicker with me? You've become a little unreasonable just because of Lin Sun. Truthfully speaking, when I stepped foot onto the peak of the grand Dao heavenly stairway, I didn't take Lin Sun seriously a long time ago. Right at this moment, a wave of rapid footsteps resounded from outside the hall, and it brought along a shocking piece of news. Fiend God Lin went on a killing spree in the burning immortal world and massacred many ancient orthodoxies. When they heard this news, the bustling and joyous atmosphere in the surroundings instantly froze, and it became deathly silent while everyone was surprised and bewildered. News of the burning immortal world had actually spread to the violet true world, especially when this news was related to Fiend God Lin. This was very unusual. Yin Zhanqiu's face sank. At this moment, such news had suddenly spread, and it caused an indescribable rage to arise in his heart. It was as if Lin Sun was intentionally going against him. Zhao Jingxian couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. Her attention was instantly drawn to the news, and she began to interrogate him carefully. When they found out that Lin Sun had done all sorts of shocking things in the burning immortal world, everyone present was stunned and shuddered with fear. He was completely a god of death, plundering the treasury of the Golden Crow lineage, killing 26 supreme figures of the various powers in the burning Heaven Valley, escaping from the encirclement of 4 king realm experts, massacring the various powers in the city, all by himself. All of this seemed to be inconceivable and shocking. Unlike the astonishment of the others, Zhao Jingxuan's clear eyes were bright, and an indescribable radiance appeared on her clear and beautiful face. On the other hand, Yin Zhanqiu's face had already become gloomy. After a while, he said coldly, this boy is so rampant and cruel. When he enters the upper 9 realms, it will be the day he dies. Zhao Jingxian smiled brightly, and she was not annoyed at all. She said leisurely, who knows what will happen in the future? At least he is still alive, and he is living a better life than anyone else. Even some of the things he has done have spread from the burning immortal world to the entire 3 realms. Yin Zhanqiu snorted coldly. The more dazzling Lin Sun's performance was, the more hostile and disgusted he became. Well, if that's the case, the top of the heaven ladder of the burning immortal world is destined to belong to Lin Sun. Zhao Jingxian said. Yin Zhanqiu's heart was even more displeased by this light sentence. He suddenly realized something, and a wisp of a strange arc suffused the corners of his mouth as he said, Junior sister Jingxian, don't get happy too early. Along with this news spreading, all the sects and powers that are scattered throughout the 3,000 dimensions will find out at the first possible moment. Zhao Jingxian said, what is it? Lin Sun is in the burning immortal world. This sounded like nonsense. However, Zhao Jingxuan's expression changed slightly. Before this news spread, it was destined that very few people would know which of the three realms Lin Sun was in. Even Zhao Jingxian only found out about this now. It could be foreseen that those forces who had long regarded Lin Sun as a thorn in their side would definitely take action when they learned of Lin Sun's specific whereabouts. Well, I believe that the burning immortal world will definitely be very lively in no time. I can't help but want to go and have a look. Yin Zhanqiu's spirit was greatly lifted, and his previous depression was swept away. Zhao Jingxian was silent for a moment and said, I also believe that the more people who go, the more people will die. Yin Zhanqiu smiled and did not argue. In the extinction domain, it was extremely inconvenient to want to transmit information. This was because the three realms seemed to be isolated, and one could only enter other realms through the Absolute Tower. However, if one wanted to use the Absolute Tower to teleport across realms, one would need to sacrifice a king herb. This determined that any shocking news that spread throughout the three realms Lin Sun was bound to be impossible to accomplish in a short period of time. For example, the news of Lin Sun slaughtering the various powers in the ancient city of immortal incineration had only reached the Violet True World a month ago, and Zhao Jingxian, Yin Zhanqiu, and the others found out about it. At this moment, Lin Sun had already stepped foot onto the peak of the grand Dao Heavenly Stairway. If Yin Zhanqiu found out about this, he would definitely be depressed again. Golden Netherworld. At the peak of the grand Dao Heavenly Stairway in the pavilion of the apex. Yun Qingbai had his hands behind his back as he stood there. His slender figure was bathed in a layer of dazzling, translucent, and smooth sword insight, and he emanated an extremely fierce aura. What is the Tao? The voice of the Tao resounded in his heart as well, and it was deafening. Unstoppable, unstoppable, unperturbed, and unstoppable. Yin Qingbai spoke indifferently, calmly, and firmly. He'd already seen through his own path during his 10 years of closed-door cultivation, so he would naturally not be troubled by such a question. After a short moment of silence, he suddenly raised his head, and his originally deep and indifferent eyes emanated a peerless and terrifying glow. It was like a divine sword that intended to crush the boundless universe. My Tao can be seized by all the grand Taos of the heavens and the earth, and it can be used by me. In this way, I can be said to be invincible. He spoke word by word, and it was sonorous like a sword howl as it resounded through the universe above him. Bang! A ray of light that was like a sword shot into the sky. 2,999 balls of Tao flames appeared in midair. However, at this moment, they were like subjects that had encountered their king, and they retreated successively. In next to no time, the ray of light shot into the sky and surpassed the universe. At this moment, the expressions of all the experts that stood at the peak of the grand Tao Heavenly Stairway changed, and they swiftly raised their heads to look over in unison. Who is it? Who has such unparalleled cultivation? Someone spoke softly. It was a woman that was pure like ice, and her entire body emanated a bone-piercing coldness. She was like an otherworldly, celestial maiden of the moon. She was Saintess Lin Shui, an ancient freak that had stunned time and possessed unfathomable resources. As soon as she appeared, the entire ancient desolation region was shaken. Yin Qingbai. In another world, the heir of the Origins sect, Yi Mok, muttered, and his eyes were filled with pure and seething battle intent. He didn't have to identify at all to know that it was Yun Qingbai's Tao flame. Just like Yun Qingbai himself, it was fierce, proud, and arrogant. However, in next to no time, someone actually noticed that a ball of Tao flame had descended above the universe. At the same time, a new ball of Tao flame had appeared, and it shot into the sky like a ray of light. It was like a divine dragon charging into the sky, and it was unstoppable. The Tao flames that were scattered in front of the universe had all retreated after being struck by Yun Qingbai's Tao flame. When this new ball of Tao flame appeared, the other Tao flames retreated even faster, and they forcefully opened up a path that led straight into the sky. Who's this? At this moment, Saintess Lin Shui, Yi Mok, and the other experts who stood at the top of the heavenly stairway of the Great Path were shaken, and they couldn't calm down. Originally, the appearance of Yun Qingbai's Tao flame was already shocking, and it had the power to surpass Zhou Su. However, this ball of Tao flame that had appeared at this moment seemed to be no weaker than Yun Qingbai. It charged all the way into the sky, and the other Tao flames retreated in fear. From afar, Yun Qingbai's Tao flame was like an unparalleled sharp sword. It swayed all the way, and it was unstoppable, displaying endless power. As for the new ball of Tao flame, it emitted an invincible and unparalleled aura, and it also made people's hearts palpitate. Who is it? At this moment, everyone was moved. Any expert who could set foot at the top of the Great Path could be said to be the ruler of a world, and they were incomparable among their peers. However, at this moment, they were all alarmed, and they couldn't calm down. Above Zhou Su, there were 3,000 Tao flames. Every ball of Tao fire here represented a person who had ascended to the top of the Great Path heavenly stairway in their respective realms. However, only they themselves were clearly aware that being able to become exalted in the test of the Apex Pavilion didn't mean that they could become exalted in the entire 3,000 worlds. Chapter 1183. The Tao fire represented the cultivation of a strong man. There was no difference between the strong and the weak, only the high and the low. In short, the 3,000 Tao fires that appeared in Zhou Su, which were as dazzling as the sun, represented the cultivation of the 3,000 strong men who ranked first on the ladder of heaven. But it didn't mean that their respective combat power was strong or weak. It was just a comparison between their cultivation. But even so, the struggle for cultivation was still very important, because the level of cultivation could affect the level of future achievements. So, when they saw Yun Qingbai's Tao flame and the newly appeared Tao flame rise rapidly and reveal an unparalleled might, no matter if it was a peerlessly extraordinary freak of the ancient times like Saintess Lin Shui, or one of the few peerless giants of the current era like Yi Mo, all of them were unable to not be shocked and moved. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun also noticed Yun Qingbai's Tao fire, and Yun Qingbai also noticed Lin Sun's Tao fire. As if it was predestined, Lin Sun instantly concluded that the Tao fire must be Yun Qingbai's, because the chi it emitted made him feel disdain, pride, sharpness, and a unique charm. The kind of charm was as deep and immeasurable as the abyss. It could control the ups and downs and swallow the world. It's him. Lin Sun's black eyes burst out with a terrible divine light. His heart was in turmoil, and endless waves emerged. The devil in the heart was everywhere. Almost every practitioner would become a devil in their heart because of their obsession with something. Killing Yun Qingbai was Lin Sun's obsession and his inner demon. If Yun Qingbai didn't die, it would be difficult to get rid of the devil in his heart. The absolute summit domain will be your burial place. Get rid of my devil in my heart, and I'll pay with my blood. Lin Sun murmured. An invisible killing intent lingered around him. In the end, the killing intent calmed down, and Lin Sun's tumbling mood gradually calmed down, and he was not shocked at all. He had been waiting for too long. How could his mind be affected? It seems that it's really him. Yun Qingbai originally planned to leave, but at this time he stood there and stared at Lin Sun's Tao fire. In his heart, he thought of the scenes when he went to the mortal world. Who would have thought that an infant whose origin spirit vein was stolen would be able to achieve such accomplishments? What a surprise! Yin Qing's white robe fluttered in the wind. His expression was as indifferent as before, and even his state of mind was completely unperturbed. Yes, he was only slightly surprised. He didn't feel any shock or bewilderment after learning the truth, nor did he feel any sense of guilt. Lin Sun, you came to the ancient desolation realm to find me, didn't you? Yin Qingbai had his hands behind his back. His figure was like a sword, exuding a peerless and invincible aura. From the first time Yin Qingbai heard Lin Sun's name to now knowing Lin Sun's identity, Yun Qingbai didn't feel anything. Because even if Lin Sun was not the baby, he had already made up his mind to erase Lin Sun. The reason was simple: to wash away the shame of the sect. This was Yun Qingbai's attitude. Old enemy? Far from it. A baby that should have been dead wasn't worthy of becoming his enemy. In Zhou, two flames of the way shot into the sky, both above the other flames of the way. It was as if dragons and tigers were fighting for supremacy and swords were clashing. They were all very strong. They were ridiculously powerful. This was the unanimous conclusion of other strong people who witnessed this scene. But who could surpass them? And who would be suppressed? This was something that no one could immediately determine. Even now, except for Yun Qingbai, very few people could see that the newly appeared flames of the way belonged to Lin Sun. At this moment, both Lin Sun and Yun Qingbai made the same action. They withdrew their gazes. They turned around. Then they left. From beginning to end, they didn't pay any attention to Zhou. For Lin Sun, no matter how powerful the flames of the way were, Yun Qingbai had to die. It was the same for Yun Qingbai. This was a tacit understanding. Even though they had never met, the two of them were able to vaguely sense each other's existence through the competition of the flames of the way. Although they didn't pay attention to it, it didn't mean that others didn't. And the results soon appeared. Boom! Yun Qingbai's flames of the way reached the highest point of Zhou, above everything, like a dominator. However, before everyone could react, Lin Sun's flames of the way rose to the highest point and stood side by side with Yun Qingbai's flames of the way. In an instant, all the strong people who were standing at the top of the ladder of heaven were shocked and in disbelief. Stand side by side? Who could surpass Yun Qingbai and stand on equal footing with him? Was it a talented ancient freak, or was it a heaven-defying genius of the present age? These doubts were destined to be unanswered, because soon a new change occurred. The flames of the way that represented Lin Sun broke through the highest point and then disappeared. When they witnessed this scene, Saintess Lin Shui, Yi Mo, and other strong people all opened their eyes wide and were completely shocked. How was this possible? They carefully sensed and finally determined that there were only 2,699 flames of the way above Zhou. Only the newly appeared one was missing. This had never happened before. Even in ancient times, when the apex domain had descended several times, there had never been such an unbelievable scene. 3,000 worlds, 3,000 places at the top of the ladder of heaven, and 3,000 flames of the way that were above Zhou. But today, because of the mysterious flames of the way, everything was overturned. In the current scene, Yun Qingbai's flames of the way were like the king of kings, shining alone at the highest point of Zhou. Originally, this was enough to make the 3,000 worlds seethe with excitement and amaze countless cultivators. But when Lin Sun's flames of the way broke through the highest point of Zhou and disappeared, it made Yun Qingbai's flames of the way seem slightly inferior. Whose flames of the way belonged to? Why did it disappear? Many people were surprised and felt incredulous. Halfway up the ladder of heaven, Yun Qingbai seemed to sense something. He suddenly stopped and looked back at Zhou on the ladder of heaven. Disappeared? At this moment, Yun Qingbai, who had always been calm and exuded absolute disdain, showed a rare trace of absent-mindedness. Then, he withdrew his gaze and walked down the ladder of heaven without saying a word. No one knew that at this moment, he was even more determined to kill Lin Sun. At the very least, he could not tolerate Lin Sun walking out of the domain of the absolute summit. Why become a king? If you don't come, I will go find you. When he walked out of the tower of the absolute summit and looked at the dazzling light outside, for words appeared in Yun Qingbai's mind. There are no two suns in the sky. I didn't expect this guy to really do it. Qiao's expression was complicated as she watched the lonely and unshakable figure walk down from the top of the ladder of heaven. She had seen everything before. Because she did not stand at the top of the ladder of heaven, she did not see the scene of the 3,000 flames of the way fighting above Zhou. But even so, she still felt indescribably shocked. From the 1,000th step of the ladder of heaven, He fought his way to the top and experienced 1,000 battles. From the beginning to the end, he did not stop even once. This had always seemed like an impossible miracle. Even with Qi Yao's pride, she did not dare to say that she could do this. Therefore, when she saw Lin Sun, who was covered with blood and scars, walking down the stairs, her pure and bright face looked very complicated. There was fear, respect, surprise, shock. There were many other emotions. If it was possible, Qi Yao would attack without hesitation. But she knew that she had no chance. Not to mention whether or not Lin Sun still had the ability to fight. The ladder of heaven was already limited by the power of rules. It was impossible for cultivators to fight each other while climbing the ladder of heaven. Congratulations, brother. You are the leader among your peers in the celestial burning world. I'm afraid no one can shake or surpass your ranking. When Lin Sun's figure approached, Qi Yao took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. She revealed a smile so bright that even the world dimmed. You still plan to be my enemy? Lin Sun's body was very numb, and he was exhausted to the extreme. Only a trace of consciousness remained clear, so when he spoke, his voice was hoarse and low. Even his eyes were empty, indifferent, and numb. But such words and eyes made Qi Yao stiff all over. She smiled a little unnaturally and said, "Let's talk about this kind of annoying problem later. Take care." After saying this, Lin Sun went straight down and never looked back. He did not pay attention to the changes in Zhou Shuzhong at the top of the ladder of heaven. He also did not pay attention to Qi Yao's uncertain expression. Humph! Watching Lin Sun's figure gradually disappear, Qi Yao's expression became cold, and she gave a cold snort. But then she sighed faintly, and her heart was heavy. She knew that it was doomed to be very unwise to be enemies with Lin Sun in the same realm. She also knew that if she wanted to suppress Lin Sun, she had to step into the king realm before him and absolutely kill him with the strength of a realm higher. Otherwise, the hope was doomed to be slim. When Lin Sun walked down the ladder of heaven, an invisible and obscure force wrapped around him. Then he could clearly feel all the power he had consumed when climbing the ladder of heaven, as well as his essence, qi, and spirit that had long been exhausted, all recovered in an instant. At the same time, everything went black in front of him. When he woke up, he had appeared in the gate of the apex tower. Except for the bloodstains on his clothes, there was no trace of injury on Lin Sun's body. He was full of spirit, qi, and spirit. The abundant and vast power was surging in his body, which was exactly the same as the peak state before entering the apex tower. Lin Sun was not surprised. Every practitioner would experience such a recovery after passing the ladder of heaven. Yin Qingbai, from today on, the gap between you and me no longer exists. Walking out of the apex tower, Lin Sun's heart was unprecedentedly calm. This strange encounter allowed him to experience 1,000 battles and witness different paths towards the Tao. He'd verified his own Tao, and he'd completely confirmed some things. P.S. These 2 or 3 chapters are a little difficult to write. Sorry to keep you waiting. Chapter 1184. He's out. There was a commotion outside the Tower of Apex. Countless eyes were fixed on Lin Sun, who was walking out of the tower. After learning that Lin Sun was going through the ladder of heaven today, the entire ancient city of immortals was in an uproar, and countless cultivators had gathered here. Therefore, when Lin Sun walked out, he saw that the nearby area was densely packed with cultivators, a sea of people. It was spectacular. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel surprised. It was also at this time that Lin Sun realized that his every move had become the focus of attention of many cultivators. This could also be called a kind of prestige. Lin Sun was lost in thought. "Child Lin, may I ask you a question? What's your result this time?" Someone plucked up the courage to ask cautiously. As soon as this question came out, everyone present immediately pricked up their ears. Lin Sun smiled and said casually, "From today on, I'm looking forward to someone being able to push me down the ranking. If anyone can do it, I'll treat him to a drink." Everyone present was in an uproar. This sentence seemed to be said casually, but it undoubtedly proved that demon god Lin had reached the top of the ladder of heaven, and he could no longer surpass him. Just like the first place, he could only wait to be surpassed. Congratulations, Child Lin. From today on, Child Lin will be respected among millions of peers in the immortals world. Sounds of congratulations rose and fell like tidewater, and they resounded through the heavens and the earth in this area. At this time, Lin Sun had already walked away. Wherever he passed, no matter who it was, they all retreated and made way for him with more or less admiration and respect on their faces. This man's prestige is like the sun, shining alone in this city. Among the peers, who can compare with him? In the distance, Luo Chuan and others from the ancient underworld Taoist sect saw this scene with their own eyes. They were shocked, but their faces were extremely gloomy. Lin Sun had a conflict with them when he went up the tower before. But now, Luo Chuan and others had extinguished the thought of revenge, and they just hated the great forces in the city more and more. If these great forces didn't deliberately conceal the truth and instigate them to control the Tower of Apex, how could they have a conflict with Demon God Lin? Let's go find those guys who kill with a borrowed knife and seek justice. Luo Chuan gritted his teeth, feeling extremely aggrieved. Being used as a tool and inadvertently offending a great enemy was something he could not tolerate. However, when they arrived at the places where those great powers were entrenched and intended to demand an explanation, they discovered that the leaders of those great powers were not there. Soon, they learned that these major factions had gathered together to seek Fiend Celestial Lin's forgiveness. It was very likely that they were waiting in front of the hall where Fiend Celestial Lin resided. This caused Luo Chuan and the others to be stunned. What was going on? Let's go take a look. Luo Chuan made a prompt decision and led everyone into action. In front of the ancient palace, at this moment, there were over 10 figures waiting there. There were both men and women amongst them, and all of them were like dragons and phoenixes amongst men. They possessed extraordinary bearings, and even though they were young in appearance, they possessed an extremely dignified aura. All of them were the leaders of the younger generation of the various great powers. They were either absolute giants or ancient freaks. In the past, any one of them would be able to shock an entire region. But at this moment, they were waiting in front of the hall, restraining their pride and waiting quietly. Occasionally, there was a flash of worry between their eyebrows. Before Lin Sun entered the Tower of Apex, he had said that if they didn't give him a satisfactory answer, he wouldn't mind paying them a visit one by one. Obviously, Lin Sun had seen through their intention to kill with a borrowed knife and watch the tigers fight. These great powers couldn't sit still at once. They wouldn't forget that just a while ago, Lin Sun directly wiped out the Golden Crow branch, Xuandu Taoism School, Sea Spirit Clan, and other forces. Some died, and some fled. It was a tragic sight. Under such circumstances, how could these great powers not panic when Lin Sun said that he would pay them a visit? They didn't want to be expelled from the ancient city of immortals, like the Golden Crow branch and other forces. Therefore, before Lin Sun walked out of the Tower of Apex, the leaders of these great powers gathered together to offer a humble apology. Although this was very shameful and not in line with their status and dignity, there was no other way. Who asked them to offend such a ruthless person as Fiend Celestial Lin? In fact, they were also depressed and wronged. From the beginning to the end, they didn't do anything. They just wanted to see the conflict between those foreign forces and Fiend Celestial Lin. How could disaster fall from the sky? Was it also a mistake not to warn those foreign forces about the dreadfulness of Fiend Celestial Lin? Of course, they could only endure this grievance. In the ancient city of immortals, they would rather offend Yama than Fiend Celestial Lin. Not long after, Lin Sun came back. When he saw this scene, he was stunned at first, but then he understood and a cold smile appeared on his lips. He didn't say much and went straight to the hall where he lived. But this made those men and women panic, and they all came up to him. Taoism Peer Lin, I'm Zhou Qingyun, the successor of Star Wonderland. Because of some misunderstanding, I've made you unhappy. I'm here to apologize. Please forgive me. Brother Lin, I'm the successor of Five Elements Palace. Child Lin, please wait." All of a sudden, Lin Sun was surrounded. These arrogant and conceited geniuses who were revered wherever they went were now meek and submissive. They had ashamed and apologetic expressions on their faces as they took the initiative to bow their heads in apology. Such a scene was absolutely rare in the past. If it was spread out, it was bound to become a hot topic in the streets and alleys. When Luo Chuan and the other successors of ancient underworld Taoism sect arrived, they happened to see this scene, and they all opened their eyes wide. It wasn't difficult to make ordinary people admire and fear them, but it was too difficult to make all the leaders of different forces apologize at the same time, and all of them had to lower their heads submissively. Is it fun to kill with a borrowed knife? Lin Sun glanced at the crowd indifferently. These men and women looked a little embarrassed and hesitated. Although they felt very uncomfortable, they could only endure it. If you see me as your enemy, then do it openly. If you only use some tricks in the dark, I'll look down on you. Lin Sun said coldly. It was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. Now, there was less than half a year to go to the upper 9 realms, and he didn't want to waste his energy on guarding against such things. Lin Sun's words made these men and women stiff all over, and they almost broke out in a cold sweat. They hurriedly promised that it would never happen again. The farce came to an end, but Lin Sun knew that these forces might be bowing their heads now. But when the upper 9 realms opened and the real battle for hegemony began, they wouldn't mind biting him hard as long as there was a chance. He knew the minds of the successors of these forces too well. They've bowed their heads at this time because they were afraid of his power in the ancient city of immortal burning. Once the situation changed, they would regard today's action as a disgrace, and they were bound to find opportunities to make trouble for him, unless he could suppress them like this all the time. From this day on, Lin Sun lived in seclusion again, intending to take advantage of the opening of the passage to the upper 9 realms to improve his immortality Tao to another level. All he needed was an opportunity to reach the peak of the King realm. Time went by, and a month passed in the blink of an eye. The ancient city of immortal burning became more and more lively. Almost every day, there were practitioners from other realms crossing over to enter the upper 9 realms with the help of the pavilion on the top of the ancient city of immortal burning. The reason for this was simple. In the 3,000 dimensions, even though the apex pavilions in every single world possessed 1,000 positions to enter the upper 9 realms, it must be known that there were millions of cultivators in every single world, so it was obvious how brutal the competition was. Moreover, there were many great forces in some realms, just like there were too many flood dragons in a pond. In order to survive, some flood dragons who thought they were weak could only go to other ponds to seek opportunities. However, all the foreign forces who entered the immortal burning realm didn't dare to act recklessly when they learned of Lin Sun's existence and the bloody things he had done. At least, things like the ancient underworld Taoism sect blocking the pavilion on the top never happened again. There were also some foreign practitioners who were not convinced, but when they learned that Lin Sun had stood at the top of the ladder of heaven and no one could shake him, they immediately gave up the idea of making trouble for Lin Sun. The changes in the outside world had nothing to do with Lin Sun. During this month of time, Lin Sun had relied on the heart control and Tao from Qionyou's heart to smoothly attain perfection in his comprehension of the undying Tao insight. He was only a step away from breaking through to the Tao truth realm. Another month later, he went. Right when Lin Sun broke through to the Tao truth realm with the undying Tao insight, a group of foreign cultivators walked out from the pavilion on the top. The person in the lead was a young man whose entire body was bathed in black lightning. He wore dark armor, and every single strand of his hair was coiled with terrifying arcs of jet black lightning, causing him to possess peerless might. A group of men and women surrounded him like a host of stars surrounding the bright moon. Tell me where that bastard, Lin Sun, is. As soon as he appeared, the young man in dark armor stretched out his hand and grabbed a cultivator from afar, and he asked with an indifferent voice, He's... The cultivator was terrified to the point his soul almost left his body, and he spoke with a trembling voice of Lin Sun's residence. Bang! The young man in dark armor tossed the cultivator away like he was tossing trash. After that, his scarlet-red eyes suddenly locked onto a building that was far away, and he said, "Come, let's go meet this little bastard." Swoosh! His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when his figure transformed into a black bolt of lightning that rumbled as it tore through the sky and flashed towards the distance. The others followed closely behind him when they saw this. They were moving in a threatening manner. In the distance, many cultivators witnessed this scene, and their expressions couldn't help but change. What's going on? There are actually people who dare to cross dimensions to look for trouble with Fiend God Lin? Those with good intentions don't come, and those who come with ill intent. These people were so domineering. As soon as they arrived, they immediately took action and targeted Fiend God Lin, and this was extremely shocking. They're experts of the Black Nightmare Dog Clan. Chapter 1185. The Black Nightmare Tengu race's experts had come to attack, and their target was Fiend Celestial Lin. Countless cultivators were in an uproar in the city of Immortal Burning as soon as the news came out. It's Go Yandong of the Black Demon Dog Clan. Soon, the identity of the young man in black armor bathed in black lightning was seen through, and it caused quite a stir. He was a ruthless man. He was a top figure of the same generation as Yun Qingbai, Yi Mo, Wang Xuanyu, and Mi Hongzhen. He was second to none. However, no one expected Go Yandong to have the courage to attack the city of Immortal Burning. Did he really think Demon God Lin was easy to bully? Let's go and have a look. There's really someone who dares to challenge Demon God Lin. There's going to be a good show. In the discussion, many practitioners had already rushed to the palace where Lin Sun lived. In front of the ancient palace, Go Yandong and his group stood there without concealing their killing intent, causing the area to be filled with a murderous aura. At the same time, many cultivators appeared and watched from afar. However, they looked at Go Yandong and his group with a trace of surprise. In the city of Immortal Burning now, not to mention ordinary cultivators, even the top figures and ancient freaks of great forces dared not provoke Demon God Lin for fear of drawing trouble to themselves. But this group of Black Demon Dog Clan experts had just walked out of the Tower of Apex, and they directly attacked without any hesitation. This seemed very domineering, but also very arrogant and presumptuous. In the eyes of many cultivators, Go Yandong and his group were no different from courting death. Is little bastard Lin Sun here? Come out and accept your death. A silver-robed man beside Go Yandong shouted with great momentum. His voice was like a clap of thunder that resounded in the world. However, what made him frown was that the expressions of the cultivators nearby had become very strange. There was no reaction of agitation or shock. Big brother, are these idiots scared out of their wits? The silver-robed man was stunned. Go Yandong noticed that the atmosphere was slightly strange as well, but he didn't mind it, and he said indifferently, Devil God Lin once annihilated the disciples of many powers in this city. Perhaps these cultivators subconsciously think that our actions seem to be slightly rash. Since you know that, why did all of you still come to throw away your lives? A voice sounded out from the crowd in the distance, and it carried a trace of confusion. How dare you? The silver-robed man's face immediately darkened, and his eyes revealed a murderous glint. Go Yandong stopped him and said indifferently, Summer insects cannot speak of ice. Why bother with a bunch of mediocre people? It's a disgrace to your identity. After that, his scarlet-red eyes sized up the hall before him, and he said, It was difficult for us to have a chance to deal with that kid in the outside world. But now that we know he's hiding in the immortal incineration dimension, we naturally have to annihilate him. His words were casual, but they were filled with incomparable conceit and arrogance. However, the gazes of the crowd in the distance grew even more strange. It was like they were staring at an idiot, and there was no lack of pity, sympathy, and pleasure in Chun Shi's misfortune. This caused Go Yandong to be unable to help but frown, and then his expression became indifferent and icy cold. Were these idiots really afraid of Demon God Lin? So you heard that Demon God Lin is in this dimension, and that's why you rushed over to take revenge. But are you sure you want to do that? Someone in the distance spoke. Why can't we do that? Go Yandong's face darkened. Everything that had happened today was too strange. The reactions of the spectators were also very abnormal, as if they were pitying them. But since when did he, Go Yandong, need to be pitied by others? These short-sighted frogs at the bottom of a well. It was one thing for them to be afraid of demon god Lin, but now they even dared to judge others by their own standards and pity them. It was simply detestable. Friends, I advise you to reconsider. Someone in the crowd sighed, and he seemed to be persuading them with kind words. This made Go Yandong somewhat unable to bear it. He was a great powerhouse of the Black Nightmare Tengu clan. In the past, he was feared and feared wherever he went. When had he ever been looked down upon like this? Don't tell me all of you think that I, Go Yandong, am no match for Demon God Lin? Go Yandong laughed out of extreme anger. His expression was cold, and terrifying black lightning surged around his body. He looked disdainful and intimidating. To his surprise, all the spectators present nodded in unison. Go Yandong was stunned, and so were the clansmen around him. This scene, it was simply making people vomit blood and go crazy. It was nothing to be despised by others, but to be despised by everyone and think that they were no match for Demon God Lin was too exasperating. If Go Yandong hadn't tried his best to restrain his killing intent, he would have killed all the spectators present. It was too damn disappointing. Big brother, don't bother with these vulgar people. It's a disgrace to your identity. The silver-robed man next to him hurriedly persuaded him. Go Yandong's lips twitched. He had just reminded the silver-robed man, but he never thought that it would be used on him now. However, these vulgar guys were really exasperating. Go Yandong took a deep breath, and his scarlet eyes were surging with terrible, killing intent. He said, "Today I will cut off Lin Sun's head in front of you, who have eyes but fail to see." Instead of being shocked, everyone looked more and more sympathetic when they heard this. As the saying goes, good words can't persuade a damn ghost, and mercy can't save a man. Who could be blamed if he didn't listen to advice when he was courting death? Go Yandong couldn't stand this atmosphere at all. He suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. "Lin Sun, I know you are inside. I'll give you a chance. Get out, and I can let you die with dignity." His voice was like a tide, shaking the field. Many practitioners' eardrums were almost torn, their blood was boiling, and their faces changed. Some even cursed in exasperation. Go to hell. To be honest, Go Yandong was really about to go berserk. When had he been treated like this? No, the faces of the people around him were also extremely bad, and their eyes were about to burst into flames. At this moment, Lin Sun's voice came out. "I've been a vegetarian recently, and I don't want to eat meat. But you just send yourself to me. It's really surprising." Puff. Many people in the crowd couldn't help laughing. Go Yandong and others were already furious. They felt that they would die of anger if they continued to endure it. "You don't want to come? I'll go look for you." Go Yandong shouted loudly. Rumble. Jet black light surged explosively from his entire body while the rumble of wind and thunder resounded, and his imposing aura rose to a shocking state. Needless to say, Go Yandong was extremely formidable, and he could be considered to be at the top amongst the great figures. However, before he could make a move, a broken blade that was jade white like snow suddenly charged out from within the hall, and it floated in midair while emanating an illusory, dazzling, and resplendent edge. "I'll forgive all of your actions today if you're able to resist 3 strikes from me. But if you're unable to, then leave your lives behind." Amidst his indifferent voice, the broken blade in midair had already slashed down. Swoosh! It was like a bright silver river of stars had descended from the 9 heavens, and it was powerful, swift, and merely its murderous aura caused space to be blasted apart like a piece of cloth. In the beginning, Go Yandong's expression was gloomy, and he was exasperated. Does this fiend God Lin think I'm unable to resist even 3 strikes? He's going too far. But when the broken blade slashed down at this moment, his expression turned grim as he sensed the terrifying strength of this strike, and it caused the rage in his heart to instantly vanish before he became solemn and serious. As one of the great figures that possessed extremely abundant battle experience, Go Yandong instantly realized that this fiend god Lin was a formidable opponent indeed, and he couldn't be underestimated. Clang! Even though he thought like this in his heart, his movements weren't slow at all. A black spear soared into the sky while carrying dazzling black-colored lightning as it collided head-on with the broken blade. Clang! Sparks shot out from the collision of the two, and merely the sound of the collision caused the distant spectators to feel uncomfortable to the point they almost coughed up blood, and they couldn't help but be astounded. At the same time, the shock in Go Yandong's heart was even greater. Only when he truly collided with Chun Shi did he realize how terrifying the strength of this slash was. It was like a torrential flood, a landslide, and a tsunami, simple, direct, and all-powerful. Instantly, he felt as if the skin on his entire body was about to explode while the vital blood in his body surged and flowed in the opposite direction. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he almost knelt down from the strike. On the other hand, the black spear in his hand was even slashed to the point it was bent like a fully drawn bow, and it emitted an ear-piercing wail as if it was on the verge of being unable to endure it. It felt as if he was being crushed by an ancient divine mountain. The second slash. Lin Sun didn't seem to be surprised that this strike was blocked. As the broken blade swept up, its power changed abruptly, and its surface was suffused with obscure and dense Taoist markings. Shit! Go Yandong's scalp went numb, and he sensed a fatal danger, causing him to choose to dodge without hesitation. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough. On the contrary, it was precisely because he was among the top magnates and possessed extremely rich combat experience that he was able to perceive the danger at the first possible moment. If it were any other practitioner, they probably wouldn't even have such a reaction. Puff! However, even though Go Yandong had reacted in the first possible moment, he still underestimated the terror of this strike. In an instant, life and death appeared. A bloody crack was cut open on his back, and his internal organs were severely injured. His entire upper body was almost cut open directly. Clatter! A rain of scarlet and hot blood poured down. Go Yandong let out a shrill scream, and his face instantly turned ghastly pale. The practitioners watching in the distance were very sure that Go Yandong was probably no match for Lin Sun. But when they saw Go Yandong, who was one of the top magnates in the present age, was seriously injured and almost cut in half with just the second strike, they were so shocked that they felt a chill all over. Demon Lin was too fierce, wasn't he? At the same time, the men and women around Go Yandong all widened their eyes in disbelief and disbelief. Previously, when Go Yandong was injured, they didn't even have time to react, let alone rescue him. Let's go, Go Yandong roared. He realized that compared with before, Demon Lin, this malignant star, was like a different person. He had become stronger, and he had seriously underestimated this opponent from the very beginning. He finally understood why those spectators looked so pitiful and didn't think highly of them. It wasn't intentional contempt, but they obviously knew how powerful Demon Lin was. At the thought of this, Go Yandong wanted to slap himself. If he had known this earlier, he wouldn't have rushed here in such a hurry. At least, he should have figured out Demon Lin's strength before taking action. Unfortunately, it was useless to regret now. He could only flee. PS1. Good words can't persuade a damned ghost. Compassion doesn't save those who commit suicide. This was a warning from CCTV News regarding the border issue in India. It was especially domineering. PS2. The purpose of writing this chapter is to make everyone compare it with the scene of Yun Qing by suppressing the ancient freak Shi Jintong with 3 swords, and to illustrate Lin Sun's combat strength. Chapter 1186. After suffering a heavy injury, Go Yandong was still able to think of escaping at the first possible moment. Many practitioners were amazed by his prompt reaction. There was no doubt that Go Yandong was really strong. Unfortunately, he encountered Lin Sun this time. The third slash. At the same time as he fled, the broken blade slashed down again, flickering and changing like a variable of the Great Way. The impermanence slash. No one could capture the trace of this slash. Firstly, it was too swift. Secondly, the profundities contained within this slash were truly too obscure, miraculous, and profound. It was profound like the profundities of the Grand Tao, and it was impossible to describe. Puff! His head fell to the ground. Then blood spurted out. In the end, Go Yandong's headless body crashed to the ground. There was a dead silence between the heaven and the earth. Amidst the silence, an awe-inspiring atmosphere pervaded the air. A top figure who had been famous for a long time had died. Just like that, the spectators were in a trance, and their minds were shocked by this bloody scene. What shocked them even more was that from the beginning to the end, they didn't see how the third slash was executed. Seeing this, the silver-robed man and the other Black Demon Dog clan widened their eyes, and their minds twitched fiercely. They felt dizzy. Go Yandong was only one step away from reaching the King Realm. He was a peerless figure that was unanimously favored by their clans. But before he could enter the Upper Nine Realms, he was killed in the dark. Some ancient freaks and peerless figures of some great forces were horrified and had goosebumps when they saw this. What kind of slash was this? Even they felt a suffocating and fatal threat. There was no doubt that even they might not be able to resist this slash. No! After a long while, the silver-robed man and the others woke up from the shock and let out screams and roars of anger. The silent atmosphere was broken. The spectators seemed to wake up from a dream and let out a long breath of turbid air. The scene just now was as unreal as a nightmare. It made them more and more aware of how terrifying Lin Sun was. At this moment, when they looked at the silver-robed man and the others again, there was not only pity in their eyes, but also a kind of sorrow. Why did he court death in the past? The eyes of the silver-robed man and the others almost split apart from rage. They were panic-stricken and helpless, and they didn't hesitate at all to directly choose to flee. But as the broken blades flickered, their bodies fell to the ground one after another. Thud, 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 sounds rang out incessantly. They were all executed. Blood flowed on the ground. Right at this moment, Lin Sun's figure walked out of the hall. He raised his hand and waved. Clang! The broken blade transformed into a ray of light and vanished between his eyebrows. Everyone, if there are such ignorant fools coming to attack us in the future, please don't try to persuade them. I'd like to know who else can't wait to stand up and deal with me. Lin Sun's black eyes glanced around and cupped his hands. The spectators' hearts trembled. Did Demon God Lin feel that he hadn't had his fill of killing? With this thought in mind, their actions were not slow. They all nodded or patted their chests in agreement. Seeing this, Lin Sun cupped his hands again and put away the bodies of Go Yandong and others quickly. Then he turned and walked into the hall. Not long after, a unique and alluring barbecued meat aroma wafted out of the hall, causing one's mouth to water. This fiend Celestial Lin is truly unrestrained. Many practitioners gasped in astonishment. In particular, some creatures like divine birds and spiritual beasts were scared. If they offended Demon God Lin, they would not only die miserably, but also be eaten. In the hall, Lin Sun was thinking about the previous 3 strikes while roasting the golden and oily black dog leg. After a while, he shook his head. Perhaps Go Yandong was a top figure among the contemporary giants, but he was no longer a threat to Lin Sun. There was nothing to write home about when fighting with him. If Lin Sun wanted to kill Go Yandong before, he only needed 1 strike. Water, fire, immortality, true dragon, and star obliteration. The 5 great ways had all reached the level of Tao truth, which was the limit that could be comprehended and controlled by the 5 realms. The higher realm of Tao rule was the power that could only be controlled by those who had reached the King realm. Tao rule was the law of Tao rule. To advance to the King realm, one had to comprehend the law of King Wei. Because it involved the pursuit of longevity, it could also be called the law of longevity. But these were not what Lin Sun needed to consider now. In the following days, Lin Sun began to meditate on the impermanence cut. This cut was extremely mysterious and obscure, involving the variables of Tao. Although it was just a cut, It contained thousands of mysteries. With Lin Sun's comprehension and the power of mind controlling and Tao linking, it was difficult for him to understand its meaning. Every time he comprehended it, he benefited a lot. This made Lin Sun think that if he could thoroughly understand the impermanence cut and master all the mysteries of the 6 strikes of Tian Yuan, the power of this inheritance might really be exerted. While Lin Sun was concentrating on his cultivation, the outside world was also changing. As the time for the opening of the Upper 9 realms was getting closer and closer, the competition in the Tower of the Top became more and more fierce and cruel. Every day, there were people who ranked in the top 1,000. At the same time, some strong people who originally ranked in the top 1,000 were squeezed out. Under such frequent elimination, it was conceivable that the strong who could finally rank in the top 1,000 must be the elite of the elite, the strongest of the strong. But no matter how the ranking changed, the top 10 could rarely be shaken, and Lin Sun, who ranked first, had never been shaken at all. This was amazing and made people more aware of Lin Sun's terror. The competition in the Tower of the Top was in full swing, not only in the realm of burning immortals, but also in the entire 3,000 realms. It could be foreseen that only 2 kinds of people can go to the Upper 9 realms. One is to be promoted to the king, and the second is to be ranked in the top 1,000 of the Tao Celestial Ladder. The competition in the Upper 9 realms is destined to be a struggle for the top figures of the 3,000 realms. Whoever can set foot in the king realm will have an advantage. On the contrary, the top figures who have not set foot in the king realm and are stuck in the reincarnation development realm will encounter an unprecedented crisis. Many cultivators came to a unanimous conclusion. The situation is not optimistic for Demon Lin. Some people were surprised to find that Demon Lin might be invincible among his peers in the realm of burning immortals. But once he went to the Upper 9 realms, the situation would become dangerous. For example, the successors of those orthodoxies were protected by their peers who had just been promoted to the king level, so they would not be threatened too much. But Demon Lin, who was alone, not only did he not have such protection, but he also had many enemies. When he reached the Upper 9 realms, his situation was bound to be more dangerous than others. Don't worry. A person like Demon Lin is not destined to be killed so easily. Think about it. He has encountered many dangers over the years. But didn't he turn misfortune into a blessing every time? Some people were very confident in Lin Sun, rising through the trials of blood and fire, transforming through the trials of life and death. Perhaps this is the path that Demon Lin wants to take, and also the reason why he can constantly become stronger. Some people were deep in thought. Since Go Yandong and his group were killed in the following days, many foreign forces came across the realms to kill Lin Sun. But when they heard about Lin Sun's various deeds, these aggressive experts eventually left with their tails between their legs. Most of these forces had old grudges against Lin Sun. For example, the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, the vast Sea Daoist sect, the Pure Land of Longevity, the Green Phoenix clan, the Sea Shark clan, and so on. They had all heard about Lin Sun's appearance in the immortal burning realm, so they had come in large numbers, trying to find an opportunity to kill Lin Sun. However, when they arrived at the immortal burning realm and learned about Lin Sun's various performances in the past year, they suddenly realized that something was wrong and had to retreat. The reason was that Lin Sun was already invincible among his peers, so no one was willing to risk their lives at such a time. After all, seizing the opportunity to become a king was the most important thing. It would be a great misfortune if they lost the opportunity to become a king because of an accident while fighting with Lin Sun. As long as they weren't fools, they would know how to choose. Big news! Bai Longting, the ancient freak of the White Flood Dragon bloodline, has triggered a peerless king's tribulation in the green illusion dimension and successfully stepped into the peak of the king realm. On this day, when Lin Sun woke up from his meditation, he heard the big news that was spreading rapidly on the streets of the city, causing a great sensation. It was hard not to pay attention to it. Bai Longting, so it's him. Lin Sun recalled that Mi Hung had accepted Bai Longting's challenge during the Thousand Flow Grand Meeting. However, he hadn't expected that this ancient freak from the White Flood Dragon bloodline would actually step foot into the peak of the King realm in the 3,000 worlds. It's the 13th already. Lin Sun pondered silently. During this period of time, similar news about peak experts becoming kings had been occurring successively. From Qi Ling Xiao, who was the first to step foot into the peak of the King realm, to Bai Longting, 13 peak experts have been born in the 3,000 worlds. This was already known. As for whether someone had stepped foot into this realm in secret, no one could say for sure. This news naturally didn't affect Lin Sun. However, to his surprise, practically all 13 people who had advanced into the peak of the King realm were ancient freaks. This was the accumulation of resources. Lin Sun had no choice but to admit that when compared to these ancient freaks, the figures of the current era lacked nothing but the accumulation of resources. Because most of these ancient freaks had entered the apex domain in ancient times, wandered through the 3,000 worlds, and even entered the upper 9 realms. Their understanding and cognition of the apex domain couldn't be compared by the figures of the current era. For example, the old toad had already locked in a great fortune in the Finshan Valley before he entered the apex domain. He didn't need to explore painstakingly like other practitioners. He had an absolute advantage innately. It was conceivable that other ancient freaks like the old toad must be the same. Don't worry. My path has nothing to do with fortune or opportunity. I only lack an opportunity, and it's coming soon. Lin Sun murmured in his heart. Recently, when he was meditating, he often had a strong premonition, as if on a whim, that the opportunity that belonged to him to be promoted to a king was coming soon. This was an extremely mysterious feeling, which came from the heart and was wonderful beyond words.